He's done it. All right, background music. All right, hello everyone. Woo! We made it. Perfect. Hello. I am off the OBS train. No more crashing for me. But it does mean that while we're hanging out here a little bit before the live stream actually starts, I'm gonna make sure all my stuff is set up right so that we can just chill out and not be having things break all the time. So how's everyone doing? Hello. Wow. Hello. Ray, nice to see ya. Nice to see ya. I've never in my life heard of Burger King baklavas, which also don't even know if I'm pronouncing them right. What does that mean? There we go. We don't have baklavas in our Burger Kings over here, but we do have foot-long churros from Subway. So that's kind of sick when you think about it. Turkish or like Eastern. I've had it before. Isn't that the what's that pastry dough called? What am I thinking of? Hey, isn't that is that the one with spinach in there? I feel like I've had Greek baklavas. It's I mean, clearly Frey will know more about baklavas than I will. But the ones that I've had are like kind of sweet. They kind of use like this really thin pastry dough that you're brushing with like almost like a watered down honey or some kind of simple syrup, and you're layering your dough on there, and then you're doing some kind of filling, and then you're layering more dough. Is that what I'm thinking of? What's this thing called? Fila? Is that the kind of dough? Phyllo. Chopped nuts and soaked in sweet syrup. I've had a lot of savory ones before. There used to be this place near where I grew up where we went to the same place for every fancy occasion that we had, and it was this Greek restaurant that served every other kind of food as well. And so they had, I think they called them baklavas for like an appetizer, but it was more savory and like spinach, like a spinach stuffed thing. Chicky, hello. So I don't know if I've ever had like the actual like dessert style baklava. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Do they have savory baklavas? That have spinach in them? Maybe I'm hallucinating. Let's get some background music in here. There we go. Nice. Savory is the opposite of sweet. That's right. Like savory, umami, a little salty, you know. A lot of times it'd be described as like meaty. Oops. Greek food is so good. Growing up, I lived across the street of a Greek restaurant, and we would always go there. Now, this isn't always the case over in the US, but I've found in so many cases the Greek restaurants we would go to in decidedly not Greek areas a lot of times would specialize in so many different kinds of food. Of course, there are like gyro places and pitas and stuff too. But shout out to that little Greek place growing up. They also had great cheesecake. Who would have guessed? But do they have potatoes? Lantern Valley, I think everyone in the world has potatoes. You've chosen the one thing that's transcended every single nation to be the most hearty and filling and easy to grow plant of all time. Maybe that's why you're such a fan. That would make a lot of sense. Let me start getting all the stories pulled up here while everyone's trickling in. Because I'm using a new software for my streaming, let me know if anything feels too loud, too quiet, looks a little off. You know, that would help me out. To make sure you steer me the right way. So it was a rough night last night. Let me tell you a little story about my dog. Let me tell you about Bailey. So on our property, where the dogs are living their dream, running around 20 acres of woods and pastures and chasing deer and chasing turkey and hunting down squirrels and chipmunks. We also have lots of weeds around, right? That are growing on the edge of the forest. Plants that have these like thorns on them, or like really woody stems that might have like a ball of seeds that has all these spikes around it. And our dogs are always going in and out of the woods. They're brushing up against these weeds, and these little spiky balls from these plants are getting stuck on their hair. They get all tangled up. It's a pain, right? Every year we try to get rid of them, and every year they continue to be a pain. Well, yesterday morning, Bailey got into some of those thorns, those little spiky balls, right in the morning, and went down there, chewed some of them out, trying to get the spiky off of her hair. And I went over there and I helped her out. But she ended up swallowing some of this like spiky ball of a plant. And I think it's kind of lodged in her throat a little bit. And so for the entirety of yesterday, she was just gagging all day, like trying to get this thing out of her throat, wanting to throw up for hours and hours and hours, and asking me to let her outside to go eat some grass to make herself throw up, if you didn't know dogs do that. And I was hoping that, I'll get her some water. That'll help. I'll maybe feed her a small dinner. Maybe the act of swallowing that food will kind of dislodge whatever's bothering her. And that didn't happen. She was still feeling bad. So then I let her outside. It's the middle of the night. It's like 11 p.m. She's just begging to go outside. So we go out there, and I open the door, and there's just like 8 deer right behind our house, like right in the backyard, 50 feet away. And our little dog, her job at the house is to chase away the deer. That's kind of what we've let become her job. Because she'll see him from the window and we'll be like, all right, let's put your little GPS collar on you so we know you're not going to get too far away. And then opening the door, she takes off and she'll chase the deer hundreds of yards away. So that's her job. So she sees these deer. She's like, I got a job to do. So then she wants to go take off and chase those deer, but I don't want her exerting herself a lot and then messing up her throat more. So I'm like scooping her up and bringing her back in the house. So she wasn't able to eat all the grass she wanted to make herself throw up. And I was like, oh, that sucks. So I was like, let's try to go to bed. An hour later, she still wants to go out and eat a bunch of grass and try to throw up. And I was like, okay, whatever, let's go. This time I opened the door, and you can hear off in the distance dozens of coyotes. Dozens of coyotes. Hello, Cora. Here's a question for you, for my international friends. Do you guys have coyotes over there? Do you hear their like laughing bark out in the darkness, in the distance at night? Because we hear them all the time. And so she hears all the coyotes. So she wants to like howl back to them. So I carry her back inside. I'm like, all right, don't do that. An hour later, she's like, please, I gotta eat some grass. I'm going crazy. And then I was like, all right, let's go back out there. This time it was uneventful, and I was out there for like 25 minutes. It's a nice night, you know, it's nothing bad. Out there for 25 minutes, she's just chomping on grass, just eating grass as fast as she could, throws up, and I'm like, all right, maybe that'll be good. So come on, let's go inside. We come inside, and she's like, yo, I feel bad. I'm still gagging. I still want to throw up. And I was like, I know you don't have anything to throw up. So we just sequester upstairs, but like every hour or so, she's like, I need to go throw up outside. And I'm like, all right, let's go out there. So like 4 a.m., I'm out there with the dog. Coyotes howling off in the distance. Deer probably just a couple 100 yards away, wanting to get in a little racing match with the dog or something. And so this morning I woke up and she hopped up on the bed and she was like, I'm gonna fall asleep right on you. And I was like, this is my life now. So we stayed in bed an extra hour or two with the dog just sleeping on me, not gagging, at least getting some sleep. So we had a late night. We had a late dog night. So there's a fascinating story. Day Swallower says, city foxes are horribly noisy. Day Swallower, are you over in the UK? Because I feel like I hear about city foxes in like England. You know what I mean? Let me go turn my fan on. In London. I was in London last month. Working on something cool for you guys. Yeah. Jiggy says, when I went to London, I saw lots of foxes. They are so cute. I've heard foxes also have like a musky smell. I feel like I've always heard foxes are like, oh, they're so cute until you get too close and then you're like, ooh, gross. Also, I'm blurry now. Yeah, if you oh my, I'm still blurry. If you see that we started the stream a little bit early today, it's because I'm using a new software for streaming because my last one kept crashing. Look at this focus. I'm just out of focus. So I started early to make sure I got all the wrinkles ironed out. Let's try that. How's that look? That was a little better. Swallower says, mangy, ugly things in my area, poop everywhere, love diapers. Huh. Foxes love diapers. You heard it here first. How about that? All right. Let me get everything set up here. We'll start our talking about all the different story stuff we're talking today. We got 3 stories today we're going over. I'm excited for this. Also, Chicky. I heard, right? I believe you told me before that your first chapter is like 20,000 words. Am I remembering correctly? I'm getting all my stories queued up. First chapter is 8,000 or 9,000. Gotcha. Jonathan Cloud, hello. Corby says it's been an exciting stream series so far. I'm so glad to hear that you think so. I love that. Oops. I've had a good time hanging out with everyone. I like seeing what other people are working on, what they're writing. I think we'll be doing this more often. Jonathan says, I missed the announcement. Oh no. It's okay. We're still getting everything set up. It was, we started a little early so that I could get things set up. We got Chicky's story. We got Brain Hopper. Isn't that Ferruccio's story? Brain Hopper? Are you creation before disintegration, Ferruccio? Jonathan says, did it just end? It did not. We are still getting started. All right, so that's Ferruccio. We got Chicky, and then Day Swallower's story. All of these other stories that were submitted, I wanted to read them too. You know, I wanted to get everyone's story up on stream. We're kind of still in the small creator, small channel era where like that kind of stuff is possible. But we only had 3 days today. You'll find a common theme. A lot of times if I decide I'm going to do some like live streams in the middle of the week, I'll let you in on a little hint. It's because my wife is out of town. And so I'm like, hey, I can do whatever I want. I'm going to do a live stream. So, we'll definitely have at least another week of live streams this year. I can tell you that. So sad. Jay Baker says that's a huge first chapter. Possibly. Depends on what's happening in there. Frucher says, what do you mean? When my wife is here, we just have our routine of we work all day. We both work from home. And then we have dinner. So one of us cooks. Usually the other one's still kind of working. And then we watch some TV. So live streams in the evening, we just always do other things, right? So when I got the house to myself, it's like a bachelor pad. I'm like, I could just like sit around watching TV alone, but that's kind of, I don't love that. And I have a hard time playing video games for a long time. And I was like, you know what? What if we all hung out and did some cool story stuff? That's the kind of thing. That's what I mean. All right, Day Swallower's story. Here we go. Nice. Let me go ahead and get everything ready. I know I'm going to be making text bigger. Okay. And our order is here. All right, I think we made it. Jay Baker says, yesterday and today almost feel like the potential beginnings of a weekly or bi-weekly writing group. Yeah. You know what? I think there's real value in finding a place to meet with the same people, talk story, do something fun, you know? There's definite value in that. Yeah, for sure. Let's make sure everything's showing well. Oh, and there's one other document I need that I accidentally closed. And then we'll be ready to go. Chicky says, I'm all in for a writing workshop like this. Be careful. Ask and ye may receive one day. Be careful what you wish for. Dang, where is this thing? All right, here we go. So I've got my 3 stories pulled up. Now I need my little agenda for today, our order of operations. I wish to receive it. All right, here we go. All right, it's game time, everyone. It's game time. Oh, son of a... It's not game time. I messed up. Dang it. Tell you, man, you get a bunch of tabs going. Everything starts to blur together. You know. Is there anyone who's been here for our live streams who submitted their story and just didn't happen to get picked this time? Some 1980s, please. What we got? We got Chicky story. We need. If we have anyone here who submitted a story and just didn't happen to get picked this time, next time we will make a little priority queue thing. See if we can get you in there for sure next time. Last thing I need is... There's Chickies. Brain Hopper, is that the one I need? Brain Hopper. All right, now he's done it. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Here we go. Are you needing another one? No, we got our 3. I just closed some tabs accidentally. All right, here's what we got going on today. Also, by the way, thanks for joining the live stream. I hope we all have a great time. I hope we learn a lot about story, have a bunch of good conversation. Today, one of our main focuses is going to be on exposition and the sort of early stages of world building for your story. I picked these 3 stories all to go on the same day. Day Swallower says, is there a theme for these stories? Is it surf romance? In the subtext, I have to assume every story is a surf romance. I picked these 3 stories because all 3 of these seemed like they could be pretty heavy science fiction. All right. And I did that because once you get into, science fiction and fantasy, there is a tendency for a lot of emerging writers who are writing in these genres to want to give you a ton of world detail right off the bat. And so I'm talking about, you've probably spent a long time planning your science fiction story. And you've done a lot of world building. You're thinking like, hey, you know what? It would be awesome if in this world it was science fiction, but maybe it was inspired by Roman architecture. And maybe we put a twist on there and we want our technology to do X, Y, and Z. And so if our technology is like that, how does that impact all of these other different parts of the world? We have this tendency, right, when we're planning for these kinds of stories, whether it's fantasy, whether it's science fiction, to do a lot of planning. And that's like the most fun part of writing those genres. But then a lot of times you see, I've started writing my first chapter. I am introducing the reader to the world. I need to tell the reader about all of this cool stuff. I put all of this thought into what the story is going to be like. The reader needs to know that. And of course, like I said, that's like one of the most fun parts of writing in a genre like this. But a lot of readers can be overwhelmed by the amount of information they get in those early chapters. So today, we're going to look at these stories. We're doing our typical sort of, looking at the stories, going to, feedback on the first paragraph, talking about is there certain prose things we want to be mindful of, how do we like how the characters are presented, detail in the world, all that kind of stuff. But I haven't read through these stories. I did roughly look at all these stories because, I just want to make sure the content was going to be appropriate for the live stream. And I also want to look at all three of these science fiction stories through the lens of how much world building is being done in these early chapters. If it feels like it's easy for the reader to grasp, are we using this read and find out mentality or not? We don't have to. There's other ways to approach it. And just kind of keeping that in mind. This idea of world building, exposition, how do we get that information out there? This is something I'm really passionate about, and my thoughts on how to present information about your world have changed since I started the YouTube channel. Which is, not a lot of things have changed like that. I feel like I've grown in my knowledge, but a lot of it's been like, here's what I think. I've learned some new information and just sort of expanded that area of my knowledge. Or like, I feel pretty strongly about this and I found other things that kind of like reinforce that. Maybe there's alternate ways of viewing things and like, I found the feeling, the thing that feels right to me. But exposition is different. In doing, now ruck around and find out. In doing these writing book breakdowns, specifically in Dialogue by Robert McKee, I feel like that book really opened my eyes to the power of dialogue. In Robert McKee's Dialogue, he talks about the most effective things that we use dialogue for is, of course, building character relationships and exploring how characters talk to each other. It shows us little bits of each character based on just like the words that they choose and what they're trying to accomplish. But he also said that pacing in your story, no, not pacing, exposition. He defined exposition as the amount of world building that you do that's not in dialogue. And I was like, what? Why in the world would you define exposition by the amount of information you present outside of dialogue? But then the more I started thinking about it, when you're not in dialogue, you are narrating the world. You are showcasing detail. Or you're doing character action. And a lot of that info dumping that we are used to seeing in some of these genres, that's through narration. Now, I know immediately what you might say. And I'm just making up a sort of straw man argument behind the camera. Which is, I am doing world building in the narration of my story. And like, I think it works really well. And you're probably right. Especially if you're writing your story in first person and you're injecting character into that narration. Because Robert McKee also calls that dialogue. That was also an interesting concept. The idea that dialogue isn't what's between the dialogue marks, the quotation marks, but he defines dialogue beyond that. And I can't remember the exact definition, but he basically says if you're writing a story where your narrator is the character, if you're injecting that narration with personality, that is dialogue between the character and the reader. And I was like, dang, okay. Robert McKee, he's cooking, dude. He really be cooking. And I thought that was really cool. So that's some of the things that like my mind's been changed since I started doing this thing. RAFO, read and find out, very brief description before we hop into our first story. We're going to spend most of our time in the actual stories today, as opposed to just talking about things. RAFO, coined by Robert Jordan, who wrote The Wheel of Time. The story behind it is people would come up all the time with theories and predictions about what was going to happen in the story. And if you said something that he couldn't respond to, without giving away some key information, or you were on the right track, or he liked your idea, he had these cards printed out called Read and Find Out, and he would give you one. It had his little signature on there. They did this for like Q&As and panels and conferences. And this became something that Brandon Sanderson adopted with a lot of his writing too. The whole idea now has sort of been shifted around to not being from the reader's perspective, which is if you have a question, just wait for the author to give you the answer when it's more applicable. But now it's also being viewed from the writer's perspective of trust your reader to be able to continue reading your story while they still have questions, and make sure you are answering those questions when the information's more relevant. You don't need to do all your world building in chapter 1. You can be introducing new world concepts in chapter 18, as long as it still serves the reading experience well. All that being said, let's get to the good stuff. We are starting today with Brain Hopper. This is from our very own awesome community member, Creation Before Disintegration. And please bear with me while I do some formatting to make sure everything looks good here. Bump up the font. I've been doing some bolding. I hope that doesn't ruin any of our formatting. And then we zoom it in. Let me know if you can read this pretty comfortably. Little hearts in chat. What I do, is that what the heart is now? Little metal hands party, hats, reactions in chat, all that good stuff. Let me know you can see it. Kaylee, just in time. Just in time. All right, great. So, oh wait, we need the blurb. We need the blurb. We need the blurb. The blurb's one of the more fun parts here. Let me pull up the blurb real fast. Creation Before Disintegration. Here you are. Brain Hopper. Let me give you the blurb. This has been one of my favorite parts, is reading the blurb to everyone. Here we go. I'm going to turn the background music off. Make it a little more gravitas. You know what I'm saying? Here we go. Brain hopping. A life-altering black market technology that will allow Will, a troubled societal deviant, to upload their consciousness into the richest, most handsome, and influential man in the world, taking over his life. Should the plan fail, there's only one thing left to do. Stare down a barrel and pull the trigger. Lucky for Will, their backs covered by the justice-bound motley crew of drug-seeking ex-movie star, a runaway police clone, and a goth grandma neurosurgeon who all rely on Will to be the figurehead against a techno-feudalist totalitarian regime in order to change the fabric of civilization. Experimental, satirical, blunt, absurdist, meta, literary, speculative fiction that doesn't hold back. That's what we like to hear, baby. That's what we like to hear. So that's the blurb. We got it sounds like it's going to be someone's personality in another body. They're in this new place. They're going to be taking advantage. Calling it right now, the goth metal neurosurgeon grandma is going to be my favorite character. I'm with you, Kaylee. Now, of course, we're looking at the prologue. This one has a prologue and the first chapter. So we may not see every character, but we can be excited if we do happen to see our goth grandma. Helljumper, welcome. Glad you can make it. All right. Here we go. We're gonna do our first paragraph analysis. You want to wear his skin. You're not a serial killer. At least you don't consider yourself one. You don't want to peel off his skin and stick your legs into his detached flesh and sew his face over yours. No, that would be morbid. You want to wear his skin, his tendons, his bones. Have his blood be your blood. Have his veins be your veins. Have his hemoglobin be your hemoglobin. As it turns the blood cells red and carries oxygen to muscles you need to be yours. You need to flex his biceps and bury his tongue in top-class supermodels worth the GDP of countries. What do we think? First paragraph, what are we getting? We say, Kayla says, vibes are immaculate. You want to wear his skin is a big place to start. Oh, by the way, remember, I forgot to say, Ferruccio, you remember the rule? During this part of the critique, the feedback, the analysis, you cannot respond to questions that come up just yet, but you will have a chance at the end to talk, so FYI. So we are getting a very interesting tone here. Kaylee says, sin from murder drones immediately comes to mind. My lip is zip. Love it. Sounds metal AF. Yeah, there's a vibe here of like dark, but like danger, but like also, like we said in the blurb, you know, we're getting some like dark humor. I want to flex his biceps. Let's keep going. He is Leolet, Homo Excelsior, Prince of the Broken States. He's got it all. Wealth and fame. He's got it all. The perfect symmetrical face, bleached smile, and piercing Tyrian eyes. Jewels manufactured in an offshore lab owned by his mommy and daddy, the informal king and queen of the fractionated country. Oh, okay. You know what? From the blurb, I was thinking, you know, like, we're going into the body of just like this rich person. But now you throw in a little bit of royalty and we got something that could be political here. That gives it a little bit more depth than what I thought we were getting into. Yeah, Kaylee says, maybe don't need the second. He's got it all. Maybe. We'll see. Well, we got to see how the prose develops here because we're still figuring out, are we in this person's head? How close are we? How much of their thoughts are we going to see? I could, because we kind of get the same kind of almost obsessive compulsion in this top paragraph, I could allow this, the second he's got it all, to exist if this is going to be a similar theme that we keep seeing. Fractionated. Big fan. Through their love child, Magna Medica, or MM as corporate crackheads tend to abbreviate, they own everything. So of course their favorite son's hair isn't made of dead cells like the rest of us, but nanotechnology. He's even got an app for changing its color, pink, indigo, jade. He can get anything by sliding on a few hue scales with his mind's eye. Hell, if he blinks, there's sushi flown in from Japan served on an Alexandrite platter by a butler carved to the likeness of any fantasy. Now remember, we're in the prologue here. I'm interested to see what sort of change we might experience going into chapter 1. But we will see that. And fuck. It was all supposed to be yours. Oh, wow. Okay, I like the ending here because this does change what I was seeing in the previous lines. I think I might combine these two to be like, it was all supposed to, drop the F-bomb somewhere in here in this one line. I think it could be a little bit more impactful. But now we go from like, I was, of course, getting stalker vibes almost from our character here in the prologue. But this last line now makes it feel like revenge. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll see. All right. So now the question is, has the main character been booted from the royal family? Is that their brother? Were they replaced? I'm going to make a prediction myself because I like where your head's at, Kaylee. Yeah, Cora says the last line really makes the prologue. I agree. We get one. This is like the classic twist, right? We get information and then the very last thing kind of rephrases it all a little bit in a different context. And we're like, oh, shoot. Love it. That's awesome. My prediction is that we got some Gattaca vibes here, where the rich royal family was trying for the perfect child. And so let's say like 2 were made, and then they took the one that they wanted, and the other one was shipped off somewhere. That's my guess. All right, I think we're in consensus, though. An effective prologue in the sense of piquing interest. And also, if we're talking in a more meta way, one thing to consider here is the promise you're making to the reader. Even something as simple as the word choice up here, delivering on the tone with all this stuff about having like their hemoglobin and all this stuff. I think you're setting a dark tone, right? And you end the prologue with like, boom, guess what? By the way, you know, this story might have an element of revenge. Marry that dark tone with a revenge story. There's even more potential there. Let's see what happens in chapter 1. Because as much as we might like the prologue, it needs to be, what we were saying the other day, it needs to be justified in its existence. For those who maybe weren't here for the whole thing yesterday, the prologue was important because, of course, we said it's like your teaser to your story. But it's also like, you know, ideally a prologue is going to exist in a story for the reason to relate to something later on in the story, maybe give us a better understanding of a core event in the story. Sometimes we have the action prologue, so our story can start off with a bang, and then maybe our chapter 1 doesn't have to. We can spend more time with the life of the character, the status quo before it's going to be changed by the inciting incident. There's a lot of different reasons, and nothing was like written in stone, but it was all things we wanted to consider about the prologue. And what I think one of our sort of final thoughts on prologues was that even if they are enjoyable to read, this is maybe the idea of the kill your darlings. It's still got to be worth it being in the story somehow, some way. Kayla says, I do find the second person voice fascinating, though it does give fan fiction vibes. I see why it was used. Very much a reader insert, describing essentially himself as this character. Could this be the voice of the prince that got his body taken? Let's see what happens. Let's go on to chapter 1. Will. The crumbling window frame rattles along to the disco hardstyle flourishing within. Strobe lights and lasers flash through the dirty glass. You lunge yourself further and further up the cold and slick fire escape. We always stop after the first paragraph. Just about every first paragraph to a chapter, I think, is worth giving a little bit more analysis. Because you never know when a reader is going to put down a book and pick it back up. And you always want to try to get that attention, you know, especially if your book is formatted in a way where you're ending one chapter on one page, but you can see the next chapter on the other page. If that chapter is attention grabbing enough, that sometimes that's all you need to just secure that reader being sucked into that story a little bit longer. Just saying. I like this. Disco hardstyle flourishing within. The cold and slick fire escape. Let's keep going. They'd have let you in if you weren't such a loser. Oof, relatable. You could be rubbing bodies with all the babes. Instead, you're ascending a rusty staircase in the pouring September rain. You're gonna slip, fall, and die. The contraption you're walking on wouldn't have passed inspection even a century ago. The following rusted ladder is the last obstacle between you and the objective, as long as it doesn't peel off the facade. The following rusted ladder. I don't know if I understand the use of the word following here. But I do know we're on the rusted ladder. Cheeky says, oh, the entire book is in second person POV, ? It's looking like it. Which, the more, I don't know if there is I'm trying to think of what the right word is. I've been encountering more second person stories in working with writers. I don't know if it's like, I do think some people more naturally think in that POV, and now it's becoming a little less uncommon to tell a story in that POV. People are getting a little more accepting of it. I think it's becoming less of a novelty. and more of like, okay, like if you can do this well, you should do it. The writer that I'm a book coach for is writing their story also in second person. And initially I was like, you know what? You're going to have to sell me on the idea that second person is the right choice. But they were like, this is naturally how I think about telling my story. This is naturally how I phrase things. And they gave me some writing, and it felt so natural in the story. I was like, all right, second person it is. Let's keep going. Tariel says, Frey says, I only knew second person POV from fan fictions on Tumblr. Always interesting to see, but wouldn't be your type of tea. Are you talking to write or to read? Because I'm coming around to the second person as a reader, too. You're not confident it won't. Look at how you roll over the ledge and land on the ground like a flopping fish. Pathetic. You deserve to be sad and wet. Heavy droplets play drums on the big metal boxes cramping the rooftops, the ventilation system or something. And a large figure leans against one. At first, I wasn't sure how I liked the look at how you roll over the ledge, but I also think that the following line makes it feel a little bit more in place because you're then flipping the perspective around to be like, you look pathetic, you know? A large figure leans against one. Get on your feet and make something of yourself. So this is interesting to me because I feel like the other day, and maybe it was Cora's story, we had a lot of first person narration, and a lot of times it did feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, Cora's character kind of talking to themselves. You know what I mean? And correct me if I'm wrong, Cora. I may be getting your story mixed up with someone else's. But I guess why I bring it up is that that's not really something you get for third person. So this still feels like it's like this interesting way to, first off, you're talking directly to me, the reader, you know? And so because this second person is kind of convincing me that I have a role to play in this story, it's really interesting. And I think this is why some people are okay with it, and some people are still figuring it out with how to experience that second person. What I have found in working with this other author is that when second person is done well, it kind of feels like someone's all right, here, I'll phrase it like this. Reading a second person story feels like someone gaslighting you into a bunch of things that you did. And you being like, dang, did I do that? Did I flop around like a fish? It's like being gaslit for 300,000 words or whatever. Kaylee says, I do think second person should generally be reserved for things where the POV character is literally the reader. There's still a separate character from the reader. I don't know if I follow that. Let me hit that again. I do think second person should generally be reserved for things where the POV character is the reader. So like where I am playing the role of the character. This is still a separate character from the reader. Are you saying this is still a second character from the reader? Or what? First person, you're riding along with the POV character. Second person acts like you are the POV character. That's how I understand it. This is the hard thing with a POV that's not the status quo, you know? But the thing is, there are plenty of stories out there using second person. It's just that we are so much more used to seeing first and third. I feel similarly from first person. It's like, wait, I what now? All right, let's keep going. You obey the voice in your... Get on your feet and make something of yourself. You obey the voice in your head that there's nothing to work with in terms of appearance. The bright promotion of a fast food chain manifests on a 5-story ad casting a wine glow. You approach from behind, curiously watching the figure saunter to the ledge without noticing you. He's going to jump and you'll lose your chance. Look at him. He's lost it. He's wearing a netted top and a pink wig. This isn't a midlife crisis. This is an end-of-life crisis. I find that line a little humorous. This is an end-of-life crisis. Hear me before you jump. You cringe at your feminine, uncool voice. He turns around, his parted lips framed by a thick mustache. Dark shades rest on the bridge of his nose. Blonde hair peeks out beneath the synthetic bird's nest. I wasn't going to. It's surreal to hear his voice in real life. He sounds so much like himself. You want him to speak more. Are you sure? I was worried for a second. He pulls his glasses down, peering over them. What now? Aren't you going to say something? He's looking at you weird. Say something before he leaves. Don't tell me you forgot what we practiced. You did, didn't you? You were so unreliable. You'll mess it all up and then you'll never be him. You'll just be you. Something forgettable. I think this is a good case for why second person can be an effective POV. Jiggy says, it would be fun if the POV is the prisoner consciousness trapped in the body that was hijacked. This is, when I read second person, and I think this is a good example, it's like, so here's the thing. I think everyone kind of has the voice in their head in different ways. Like how you happen to think about things can be very different. I feel like I have a very clear voice in my head. Now, I'm not talking to it like, hey, what are you doing? But this is the feeling I get when I read second person. And you have to admit, if you're able to make the reader feel like your narration is bringing them into the story, that's an effective way to tell the story, regardless if it's something you're used to or not. So like this whole part, this part, what now? Aren't you going to say something? He's looking at you weird. That feels to me very relatable. That feels like in some world that could be what's actually going on in my head. What are you doing? They're looking at you weird. Say something before he leaves. Don't tell me you forgot what we practiced. That sort of internal, that internal narration. But also, not everyone thinks that way, which is also a mind-boggling thing to one day discover, is that everyone thinks things differently. What the heck? Kaylee says, at this point, the narration sounds like a demon in my head bullying me. That's what I'm saying. I just call that a Thursday night, Let's keep going. Also, I like this. You'll just be you, something forgettable. I think we're getting some core character dilemmas in here. Hold on. Genius? Your Genius fable. Are you reminding him? Get to the point already. He pushes his sunglasses back up. I'm not really feeling any pictures or autographs today, if you'll excuse me. You extend an arm. He walks through the blockade like it's nothing. You scramble after him. He's so much bigger than you. You feel like your head barely clears his waist, but in reality, you're closer to reaching his shoulders. You're wearing lifts, though, because you're barely big enough. You're barely a big enough shit to make a stain. Ouch, huh? Had it been an old classmate or a colleague who said that? Hey, you know what? This is that personal narration that, again, is reminding me of how Cora pulled it off in first person, of like, this narration's being injected with personality. We're getting a little more, right? In this case, we're getting some history. Without saying hardly anything else, we have a character that we know is insecure. They don't like the sound of their voice. They feel like they're small and weak. They have this image of themselves that's very hard for them to deal with. They've been bullied by other people. But very little of that has been actually said on the page. It's all that extra stuff that we get. What else we got? I have 0 words when thinking, so it takes effort to translate thoughts into words. Naturally, that's necessary when putting things on the page. say a wow word tonight. This is a very flavored prose. Just made a clip, took some time, so I'm a bit behind. Uh-oh. Let's keep going. Mr. Fable, I can get you revenge on Leolette. You might as well be on your knees begging. Hear me, see me. Hold it together, push out your chest, feign authority, make him interested. You know, another way you could look at second person prose, and as I'm reading this out loud, it becomes very clear to me. Another way that you could look at second person prose is that I'm convincing the character what to do. Like, this is what I'm saying. You might as well be on your knees begging, hear me, see me, hold it together, push out your chest, feign authority, make him interested. I almost feel like I'm the voice in the character's head. But that's only because I think I'm reading it out loud, and so like I'm saying all these things out loud. I think if I was just reading it on the page without vocalizing it, it wouldn't feel the same. But that's what I'm feeling right now. Frey, you're scaring me with what you might have shared in the Discord. Does it make me look good or bad? I'll find out later. I'm not interested. His words deflate you. Your throat closes. Then the club door smacks you in the face. Brock! Is that the phonetic spelling of that? You crash your head against the metal. No pain, no gain, only pain. I think I'd probably rephrase this. You crash your head against the metal, I think is different from the door hitting you. The phrasing of this makes it sound like our main character is like, bam. No gain, only pain. You tear the door open. The air is instantly thick and lacking oxygen. The pink wig rides above the crowd in the distance. People toss you about as you shoulder through their dancing. Your fist connects with some girl's hip. She hisses and bares her fanged teeth. B-word. She'd elbowed you first. The floor transfers the energy of the bass up through your legs. Your eardrums are about to explode, and the frickin' lights are triggering an ocular seizure. You can barely see. Been there, done that. No t-shirt, though? Cor, what are you talking about? What are you... Never mind. Let's keep going. Suddenly, you're out of the pit and faced with a closing elevator door. Your sandal wedges. That one feels a little awkward. Because sandal wedges are a thing, right? Like wedge shoes. But also wedge is a verb. But in this case, I would want to like tell me that, we stop the door with the sandal, I'd rephrase that one. For a moment, you're unsure if you're going to lose it. Then the doors give away. Gineas's expression is unreadable when you enter. He leans against the back, and you press yourself into the farthest corner. Excellent filtering. Thank you. Don't you want your wife back? I bet Leolette's screwing her as we speak. He crosses his arms, muscles rippling beneath the holes. What's your problem? He can crush you even if most of those are prosthetics. And he sounds like he just might. Why don't you invite me somewhere quieter so we can talk? I promise you want to hear what I have to say. He shoves past you. Frick off. I hope I'm not ruining the gravitas of the story with my filters. Frick off goes hard. I don't care what you say. When you follow, you're grappled from both sides and tossed into the street. The miles-long queue as your witness. You don't understand the appeal of clubs, especially not the ones that are 20 stories tall and always at it. I think this moved a little fast. Going from the elevator to being grappled from both sides and tossed into the street. I think we need to know, right? The elevator doors opened up. The bouncers grabbed us. Right now, we don't really know who we're getting grappled by. And I know that the important part isn't the fact of who's grappling us. The important part is we're getting tossed out of the club. But that ambiguity here is probably something we want to avoid. A yellow neon sign glows sickly above. Limitless. Good name for a club. Sounds like a club that always is at it. Piss off, kid. A burly bouncer jabs her thumb in the direction she wants you to piss. I like that sentence. You walk the other way, shoving your hands into the pockets of your jacket. He'll come around. He's just upset you interrupted his suicide. He's probably on drugs, though you had hoped that would have helped. You'd like to see him run away now. The intercom on the door of his luxurious apartment lights up. We're still moving a little fast. You know that there's a camera in this, right? A distorted version of his voice rumbles. Who in their mind would open for someone in a balaclava? Is that how you pronounce that? You can feel his sigh through the speaker. Go away before I call the cops. Oh, yeah, you know what? I think you might have been right, Kaylee. That makes more sense now. Just because and you know what? I'll even take the fault on this one because I changed all the formatting when I was making my text bigger. We did have a scene break here. I just totally missed it. So good catch, Kaylee. So now it goes, he's probably on drugs, though you had hoped that would have helped. Scene. You'd like to see him run away now. See, that works. Good catch, Kaylee. All right, let's take a second. Let's talk about this scene up here. All this stuff that happened. I want to say, in my opinion, I think we started pretty strong. I think we got a good description. You built the scene on the, I guess, the rooftop, for lack of a better word. I know we were going up the fire escape. Then we flopped on the floor like a fish. Then there were AC ventilation systems. Okay, and then we saw our dude. After, I think I'd like, here's so Jakey says, I'm a bit lost in the setting, not exactly sure where we are. I know we're on the rooftop of Limitless, because of course we find the name of the club at the end of it. I think what might have gotten lost is our traversal from the top of the club, through the club, to the elevator, out the front door. I think the moments in between the interactions went a little fast. Because we had... Okay, so here is where we leave the rooftop. Here's where we're putting our foot in the elevator door. Then we're in the elevator. And then here we're outside of the elevator. So in my opinion, and again, if you remember this when we talked about yesterday, all of this is just the opinions of all the different people who are reading this story. So none of this is fact. None of this says, like, here is the objective way to do it. But in my opinion, I would take a little bit more time as we're moving through these places. Especially because you have an option for this character who doesn't really like clubs. Where's our club? Because we kind of like, we start walking through the club. We are going into the elevator. That kind of all happens in this one paragraph. So, maybe consider adding some sort of interaction here, whether it be with some random person, whether it be with Guineas, that gives us a little bit more time to explore the setting of the club. I think this is also a good place of building atmosphere. We talked about contrast yesterday. The contrast of being on the quiet rooftop above the bar, feeling maybe the thumping of the music through the rooftop, to now being in here. I liked when we started that it was the air was instantly thick and lacking oxygen, right? Now we got this contrast. You're starting to build up this setting around us. I would think specifically, can we expand this journey but through the club out in a way that's going to show us something really good about the character? You've been really good about building up this idea of like this character who is insecure, but now they're trying to take action, but they don't feel like they're good at it. They're trying to be active in the story, but they have a very passive personality. This is another place that you can showcase that. And we kind of have that. You know, your fist connects with the girl's hip. She's mad, but that's not fair. Like, she elbowed you first. There's a hint of it in here, but we move too quickly in here, and I think that's left some readers being like, wait, I thought we were just on the rooftop. Now we're in this elevator, and then down here after our dialogue exchange, now we're out on the street. So in the same way about our traversal from the rooftop through the club to the elevator, to expand on that out a little bit, I could see there being a good moment here that you can build up when our character gets grappled by both sides, where Gineas is still present, where our character, even while they're being carried out, says something, right? In fact, he can even be something very similar to "Don't you want your wife back?" kind of leaning in on that point of conversation, but showing that even while they're actively being removed, while they are passive and not the kind of person that can really take the most action in the story, they're still trying to accomplish their goal. And that's reaffirming a lot of what I think I'm seeing in the character so far. Jay Baker says, we got the disorienting music and the lights in the club, flashes of progress. Yeah, I got lost from the rooftop and then we were out. There you go. That's all different feedback from different readers. And then the scene break clutch. Because now this makes a lot more sense. You'd like to see him run away now. The intercom of the door of his luxurious apartment lights up. You know there's a camera in this, right? Oh, sorry. You know there's a camera. Wait a minute. I just sound like an old-timey narrator. You know there's a camera in this, right? Sound like an old gangster. A distorted version of his voice mumbles, "Who in their right mind would open for someone in a balaclava?" You can feel his sigh through the speaker. "Go away before I call the cops." You pull off the mask. Your fingers tangle in your hair. Right, I just took a screenshot. Now I have something to show the police. Smart job. Yeah, no problem. You pat the top of your head, laying the tussles. Toss? What the heck? What's happening to me? Tussles? Is that the word? I feel like my brain's short-circuiting. Static from the intercom is the only thing that fills the silence. You laugh nervously. This is nothing like the movies, you know. You're supposed to hear me out. The static cuts off. He took his finger off the button. You grow a bit more desperate. Do you remember the Reggie Porsche guy that you played back in your early career? I feel like him right now. A click and more static, but it cuts off again. Gut-wrenching silence. Don't give up. Keep going. You'll win him over with your encyclopedic knowledge of movies. This exchange so far, I think is really good. I like this. We have a character who's still, here's the big vibe I'm getting from the character. This insecure, unconfident, but like still trying to do this thing that's important to them. Which I think is what you're going for, and I think I'm getting it. But I like this exchange here. You clear your throat getting into character. Give me a chance like Pascal gave Reggie one. You lower your voice theatrically. Sir, I know I just fix yachts for a living, but trust me, I can fly one too. I'll win the race and your daughter's heart. That was fun. See, this is a fun scene. It's tousled, right? Tussled? Tousled? All right. Anyways, I gotta get off that word. This is a fun scene, though. I like this. The intercom clicks on again. Security's been called. I'll give them your photo. I don't know how you got in, but there definitely won't be a next time. What a jerk. You hoist your takeaway bag up for the camera. You mind if I drop off these hand-cut sea salt fries with rich garlic parmesan foam at your neighbors first? I can't have my ratings going down. No reply. A distant elevator chimes open. One tired-looking security guard in his late teens trudges out. That was a good scene here. I like this scene more than the one that we got on top of the club. But I do have Cora. That does not help me in the slightest. Oh, we got William. Hello. I like this whole exchange a lot. I do feel like these two scenes are both trying to accomplish the same thing. And let me take a quick look ahead. You press the intercom. Oh, brother. I was going to say, I feel like there should be a scene between these two where we get to know more about the character before they arrive at this door trying this whole thing again. But I'm looking forward into the next chapter, and it seems like this is going to be part of the joke, is that this person doesn't give up. So they're coming back again. They're back at the intercom. That's fun. And that can be okay. You guys are crushing it on the phonetic spelling. So what I was saying is, it may not be the right move if the part of the joke is the fact that he just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. Let's read a little bit longer, and then I'm going to revisit that thought. You press the intercom. Yoo-hoo, it's me again. I know you're in there. You knock abrasively. I think aggressively is maybe the right word. Abrasively, I feel like it doesn't refer to this in the same way. Finally, the light blinks on, pulsing green. How did you get in? His voice. Oh, how did you get in? His voice is deep, like he's just woken up. You look at the time in the corner of the display. It's 5:30 p.m. Don't tell me you were sleeping. The door opens ajar, shrouded in darkness. His steely blue eyes peer down at you. You can make out a loose T-shirt with some print and a bare leg ending in a fuzzy candy cane sock. The kind you buy your dad for Christmas because you don't know what else to give him. Here's a question I have right away. I don't know how much time has passed between these two things. And that's important because him pressing the intercom again right here, let's say that happens right after the security guard comes out, has the feeling that he disposed of that security guard, versus this being the character returning back the next night or the next week, is now like, okay, like, I'm not giving up. But like, also, if you remove me, like, I'm probably going to get removed. Two different things there. We're going to go a little further here, and then we're going to talk about the story as a whole. I don't think we're going to get all the way to the end here. It's 25 pages. A bit early for that, you think. You point at his foot. He follows your finger. His toes flex subconsciously. When he looks back up, his mouth opens and closes. Then he wordlessly hands you an autographed picture of himself. It's a shirtless pinup of him leaning suggestively against a brick wall. Nice. His ass hangs out in some retro spacesuit pants, a silvery spaghetti thong hugging his glutes. Nice. You got what you wanted, now leave me alone. I've already called security. The door closes with a heavy thump. Your eyes scan every pixel of the laminated paper. Not what you would have expected from today's yield, but it's something. The same picture hangs above your childhood bed. For research purposes, of course. You must have manifested this fateful encounter, carrying your new treasure close to your chest, careful not to crease it. You wonder if your siblings took your old one down after you left, or died, or whatever. That's a good line here. Building some mystery for our character. So this is kind of interesting, all right? Ferruccio, I think this is interesting because your second person narration has taught us some things about the character, and yet we don't know anything about the character. You know? We don't know their name. I don't think we do. Maybe I don't think we know their name. Oh, when we know Will, we know the name of the chapter, right? Yeah, William, it could be the photo had pixels. Ergo, the paper has pictures. Anyways. I like this line here because you're hinting at the history and all these kind of things. They're all adding up. Here's something I noticed, though, because just the nature of how the story is told. Whenever the story switches over to he follows your finger, his toes flex up, you got what you wanted, I kind of forgot we were in second person. When we're getting a lot of action of a different character, it starts to lose that feeling of second person, which I think for a lot of readers means it becomes a more natural read. And then when we return to the main character doing action and then back to that second person voice, you're kind of reminded of it. But that was something interesting that I got because, I'm not reading second person all the time. Let's keep going. You there, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The same guy as yesterday closes in on you. There's that passage of time we were asking for. I do think I would still want that passage of time more clear at the top of this scene break because of how it can kind of change how you would perceive the situation. Even though we get it later in the chapter and it becomes clear, we spent a lot of time in that chapter break before we got that, if that makes sense. Of course, right away, you take a look at his name tag for the first time. Is this an Elon Musk joke? What's there? Is this Kyle? Was that what that name was? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Am I crazy? Didn't Grimes and Elon Musk have a child that was named like KAE Delta sign dash X7? This is Kyle Jr., of course. And here you thought clones and bots had the idiosyncratic names. He rests his hands on his hips. Nothing is greater than Nate Delta Jr. That's hilarious. Nothing is greater than... Is that the full name? All right. Freight posts. XAEA12 Musk. Hilarious. Nothing is greater than Nate Delta Jr. Of course, you curtsy. He scratches his neck beard, unimpressed. Nothing is greater than Nate Delta Jr. is my name, he explains. It signals for you to move. There's some of that humor. I like that. That's really fun. He swaggers forward, pants so tight he has to compensate with his hips. Naturally, he clutches the front of his skinny jeans because it looks tough and to keep them from drooping. You should pants him. Watch him chase you with his dick out. All right, you know what? I think that's a good place to end. Let me do a quick scene to see if we get another. I'll take us to the scene break, and that'll be where we end with this one. Watch him chase you with it out. No. Nate's tough. We like him. He glances at you, pressing the button for the ground floor. Initially, you whistle along to the music, but you're just dying to know. So, Nate, that name of yours, is that like a cult thing? He thumbs his tag. Nah, man, it's just algorithmic. Mine's passed down from my father. So it is a cult thing. The Algorithmics are a religious sect. Hey, Exposition, we found some. The Algorithmics are a religious sect. They worship algorithms? Yeah, that sounds right. The lobby of reflective glass panels show off some great angles if you're into catwalking or just looking at yourself in general. Shout out content creators. And that's probably the last thing you're into. A holograph of a fat turkey statue fountain runs in the middle, simulating the daily life of a fat turkey statue fountain or something. Trickling, rippling, swirling water and all that. You walk right through into the dismay of NV3 or Nate, duh. There it is. Who sees you off from his desk. With the flick of your wrist, you bid him farewell. One day, you won't see me coming, guardian of the condominium. He's mildly amused by this. All right, I'm glad we read to the end of that scene break. Here's the thing. This felt like it got a lot more... I felt like there was a tone shift here. I felt like there was a tone shift. I think this was fun. I would say, let's take some time for some final thoughts. My final thoughts on this so far are that second person can be used effectively, but it kind of doesn't matter how effective it can be in the story. I think just because a lot of readers aren't so used to reading it, there's always going to be a little bit of a barrier. And because publishing as a whole, let me move this back over here. Because of publishing as a whole has kind of avoided using the second person a lot in their stories, you kind of do get this feeling of like what Frey said, which was they had only experienced second person mostly through things like, you know, reading stuff online, stories that other people have written online versus a published book that you might pick up off the shelf. And that does carry, depending on the experience of the reader, I think it is kind of a natural sort of feeling towards second person. I think you use it effectively. I think that I do get a lot of personality from our main character. And then I feel like I get some of the author's personality from this part of the story where we're introducing nothing's greater than Nate Delta Jr., right? That's a lot of fun. That has like some, it's got the vibe of like the kind of thing you would read in like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy style humor, right? I could see that being in something like that as well. I think that our scene in our opening first chapter in the scene, I feel like there is some room for improvement in spending a little bit more time on the environment. It was clear that we had some readers that were like, okay, I know we're on the club, but now we're in the elevator, now we're outside the club. And that can either be you restructure that scene so, you know, the interaction with Guineas takes place throughout the travel, as opposed to us interacting with Guineas on the rooftop and then in the elevator, and then we're kicked out. It could be something that traverses all of these things. Now the reader's invested in the dialogue that's happening between the two characters as they're moving. I think we could get a little bit more description of the club once we're inside there. A little bit more environmental description as a whole. Once we get to being outside of the apartment or the condominium of Guineas, it feels like the story comes a little bit more into its own, but also that may be because there's less detail for the environment. You know what I mean? Like, you're more focused on just the conversation between the two because we have an environment that's less dynamic, that less needs to be described, like being in a club. And so as a reader, we're like, okay, I know where we are. I can focus on this other thing. So up to you to sort of figure out, you know, what the symptoms are for how we got here. I think our prose is fun. I like all these little lines here that you choose to put in here. Do you mind if I drop off these things? Like that just kind of adds some fun to the story. Getting the pictures fun. The idea that we had this crazy photo above our childhood bed. We get a little character history with after you left or died or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff in here. Second person can be something that a reader finds and they totally enjoy. Of course, it is still just like a newer thing. So it just feels less natural to some readers. That does not mean you should change it if you like telling your stories in second person. You should keep writing it in second person if that's how you naturally go through here. The ending of where we stopped, at least, it felt really strong. I'm getting a little bit more from our main character than I was in some of the other places. And because it's all happening in dialogue, that's just always a great way to showcase character. And I think those are the last of my thoughts. Before we have our author be able to speak in the chat again, this is the last time. If there's anything else you would like to throw in here into the chat, things that you think, improvements, things you loved, prose, second person, character stuff, anything that you want to hear. And then we'll open it up for our author to come back in and be like, sick. Kaylee, of course, says, get out of my head. Nate ate his plate by the gate. Good job, young legend. Some shift in tones are abrupt. We do go to this more fun tone pretty quickly. Following some of these other scenes. I can agree with that. Overall, well-constructed opening, prologue. I do think, oh yeah, I talked mostly about the chapter. The prologue, I think was pretty effective in what it's doing. Still to be determined on how it's going to play in with the rest of the story. It paints a pretty dark tone. Now, that being said, I feel like the story started to come more into its own by the time we started shifting to like a more fun tone. That's just my opinion. Of course, as second person at first was jarring, but became enjoyable quickly. And I think that's a pretty common sentiment for readers of second person is like, oh, like as I'm looking at this page, it seems like something I haven't experienced before. But when you start reading it, you're like, okay, I kind of get what it's effective at. All right, Ferruccio, come back. Come join us. Is there anything you would like to expand on? Questions, clarifications? You are welcome to do so in the chat while I get the next story ready to go. That next story will be Scene 1 from Chicky's ICC Ninlil. Virgil says, guys, I swear I'm normal. Oh, that's good. You're not fooling us, Ferruccio. Thank you all for the insight. Yeah, Ferruccio, thank you for sharing your story. That was a lot of fun to read. A lot of really funny turns of phrase. I'll say that. You really put my family-friendly filter into effect. That was fun. All right. Bright Lights Big City by Jay McInerney. It's a good example if you want something besides Choose Your Own Adventure. I assume, Jay Baker, you're talking about like just another second-person story. It only gets more ludicrous, but it's also pretty dark. Hey, you've piqued Helljumper's interest. Jiggy says, I have a question for Ferruccio. How did you come up with Nate's name? That was a fun part of the story. I've found, Ferruccio says I could go on forever about why I chose second person. And I think it's equally as valid as writing in first or third person. It's just less common. But I think it comes with some baggage because of that. But I also think that the first time a reader picks up a second person story and they read it and they find that there are elements of it that are like unique to second person, you kind of, at least personally, you kind of come with a respect of like, okay, like I see why second person has some things that first and third person can't provide. And for me, in my own personal feeling, it's the idea of like, it feels like I am more directly involved in the story somehow. That's my own personal feeling about it. Everyone may be different here. All right. There you go, Cora. So this was a wow. So this is second person storytelling. Yeah, it can be really unique. All right, I am going to get ready with the reading Chicky's blurb. Ferruccio, if you are so inclined to, if you want to share what you shared with me in the story workshop in the Discord, sounds like some people may be interested in reading some more, seeing where it goes. If you liked that style of humor, you know, that's a Ferruccio original right there. All right, Chicky, you know the rules. It is time. Chicky says the blurbs. Wait, Chicky, before you go, this is your story that you have made a lot of progress on, right? This is, what is the word count that you're at with this story? Chicky's gone. All right, to the blurb we go. Virtue says, fun fact, there is another POV in third person. I just didn't mention him in the blurb because we aren't going to reach it. I think it's a good call. Switching perspectives is pretty crazy, but as long as you tackle the first POV tense, you know, like perspective switch right, all the other ones just sort of work. I know, it's crazy. It's a crazy story. All right. Chicky, do you want to provide any of the current word count? 352,000 words. And this is how it starts. The Fire Nation attacked. All right, Chicky, we're going to the blurb. The blurb is... After 12 years in cryosleep, Alice Marlin wakes up 3 days early due to a malfunction of her cryosleep capsule in the Hercules 3. Their mission? To repair the Interstellar Conqueror crew's Ninlo's communication systems. However, Alice's dreamed vacation soon turns into a nightmare when she finds out the Federation was hiding the truth. The signal, which Alice's graduation project managed to triangulate, wasn't asking for help. It was a warning. With no way to avoid it, the crew is heading to a death trap. Forced to keep the signal secret, she begins to get close to someone who could become her first friend ever. But is she interested in Alice, or just in her supposed knowledge of the signal? Now she has to find a way to survive whatever might be in the Ninlo and return to Earth, while for the first time, not worrying only for herself, but for her possible first friend as well. That doesn't suck, Chicky. First off, I gotta say, it's probably hard to try to summarize a blurb for a story that long, regardless of what you write. Let us journey into the ICC Ninlo. You're going to hate me, Chicky. I'm about to ruin all your formatting to make the text bigger. I hope you understand. All right. Everyone, can you see this? Give me a heart emoji. Let's see what other emojis would be good. A thumbs up, a bicep emoji. Let me know if you can read this on the screen, if it's too pixelated. We got hearts. All right, we're going. So in this case, we are not starting with a prologue. We are starting straight with chapter 1. Now let's do it. Darkness embraced her as soon as she opened her eyes. She was freezing and tried to move, but her muscles didn't respond. What was happening? She couldn't remember where she was or what had happened before that moment. In her mind, nothing besides the cold surrounding her existed. She tried to take a deep breath to focus on her muscles, and it was then that she felt it. Water. In her mouth, her nose, all around her. Was she drowning? Panic saturated her brain, making her muscles finally react. She started flailing, hitting her hands and legs against whatever was near her. But there was something off. She was almost sure she was breathing somehow, despite feeling the liquid inside her. Forcing herself to calm down, she stopped moving. Where was she? She extended her arms, reaching some kind of barrier. Immediately, a soft blue light began to blink in front of her. All right, we got our first opening thing. I'm considering all of this to be the opening chapter because it's all so connected. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say what my concern is going to be. Don't worry, Chickie. Don't worry, Chickie. Because I know, I got to say it because I have read a bunch of short stories from writers of a character waking up in a ship. And at least in the short stories, what quickly becomes an area of improvement is that this character being isolated doesn't get enough chance to participate in some sort of dialogue that we don't get a great perspective of who they are. Now, I know we're just about to get our potentially an AI voice, another character voice. I don't mind the fact that we're waking up in the cryostasis pod. In a story like this, I kind of equate it similar to a fantasy story starting in a quaint town. This is just like one of those things where like stories start this way, and I personally love it. I like the waking up early in the cryostasis thing. I think it brings a lot of cool opportunity. But in those short stories, the fault is always the fact that we spend all of our time in the character's head and never really getting that dialogue that showcases more of their character than just internal narration. That's my worry. We'll see what happens. I believe in Chickie. Otherwise, here we're getting the confusion of the waking. We're getting the cold. I'm okay with. I like with how we're explaining. We're being able to breathe in the water. Let's keep going. Welcome, Alice. A female voice distorted by the liquid greeted her from out of nowhere. I hope you had a pleasurable dream. White lights turned on around her one by one, illuminating the space she was in. The walls were white, and a glass window in front of her showed her reflection floating in the darkness outside. In seconds, the water started to drain. Alice descended with the liquid. Her bare feet touched the ground, but her knees weren't able to support her own weight. She continued down while throwing up and coughing, trying to force out all the liquid from her lungs and stomach. Easy there. You've been in cryogenic sleep for 12 years, the voice said from inside the capsule. Give yourself a couple of minutes before walking out. Alice tried to walk, but her lungs were still filled with liquid, making her cough again. The touch of the capsule on her skin sent goosebumps down her spine. She was almost naked, with only white underwear on. Her pale reflection was sitting in the darkness like some kind of ghost staring back at her. Her rusted tangerine hair covered most of her face, flowing down to her chest and ending at her hips. 12 years of hair growth. That'll do it. Kaylee says, is that voice an AI or an actual person? We are yet to know. I could not commit to the AI voice because I didn't want to assume. I can feel the inspiration of like Alien, right? Of like the, Alien has the intro for, 1 and 2, maybe even 3 of that sort of waking up in the cryostasis. Alice tried to talk. Her lungs are filled with liquid, making her cough again. I think here, because we already have the imagery of throwing up and coughing from the liquid in her lungs and stomach, I think I'd like for you to pull from some other sensory kind of thing. Tell me about the feeling of the liquid in the lungs, because I've never felt that. That could be a great way to make something a little bit more visceral for the reader. Is the feeling of this liquid? Is it thicker than normal water? Can we feel it traveling up that esophagus and coming out? When she tries to talk with this liquid in her lungs, in her throat, is it bubbling out? Do we feel those bubbles? Right? We've already got the visual of, the lungs and throwing up and coughing. Give me a little more sensory information. Rusted tangerine hair covered most of her face. All right, let's keep going. Corby says, throb of the heartbeat in her ears. I want to know what the cryo fluid smells like. Kaylee coming out says, give me the smell. I don't actually want to know, but I should know. Yeah, and this is, I would also say, like, you're in the unique situation of, you can kind of pull from what people happen to feel when they're drowning. Or like that sort of like, is there the panic of, does it feel like drowning? Or because this is like oxygenated liquid, is she just like, bleh. All right, let's go. Seawater with chemical smell would be perfect. You see where we're going? Jonathan says, calm down, Kaylee. I might have read Kaylee's message with a little bit more inflection than they meant. All right, let's keep going. Where am I? She asked in a barely audible whisper. You are in your cryosleep capsule. I know I'm in a capsule, Alice replied, frowning. I mean, what's this place? You are in the Hercules 3. What? She paused to take a breath. What year is this? It is the year 2277. Her head began to spin. Her legs were recovering their usual strength, so she wasn't afraid to move her hands away from the walls to press her eyes. I like that. I like that imagery. I would probably do the same thing. The memories slowly returned. The International Federation of Space Recognition, the Hercules 3 cryogenic sleep, the thread of thoughts was forming a clearer image of what was happening. She tucked her hair behind her ears and ran her hands down her face in an attempt to wake up completely. After a few seconds, she spotted the capsule's control panel on the right of the glass and touched it. Nice. A little sprinkling of some exposition. Nothing heavy, so we can just keep on moving. I like that. Let's keep going. The door moved to the left and stopped with a click. Outside, everything was dark and silent. She took her first step in 12 years, relying on the capsule's edges to stay on her feet. The floor was cold. The whole place was cold. A shiver traveled from her feet to her skull, making her shoulders tremble. I like that. I like the shiver from the feet to the skull. I feel like we would normally hear this shiver go up your back. Mentioning the skull kind of makes it gives me like a little bit of like an unsettled kind of feeling. I don't know why. Is it crazy that you all have wet skeletons inside of you right now? You ever think about that? Let's keep going. Where is everybody? Why is everything off? So here's another thing. Where's everybody? Why is everything off? I think I would naturally say where is everybody? But this is such a like reader specific thing. But this is one of those things that does trip me up sometimes when I'm reading certain books. Sometimes there's a book, a series by Christopher Rauchio, I think is maybe the author's name. It's the Sun Eater Saga. If anyone's read these books before, the first one is... Hold on. First one is okay. Empire of Silence. Okay. Specifically, this author sometimes will write a sentence that everything is correct in, but my brain would emphasize words differently than I think what the author emphasizes. And it's really the only time I've experienced it is with Christopher Rauchio. And I don't know, but it's happened in I've read 2 books of the series. It's happened in both books of the series where there's been multiple sentences where I've read it and I've been like, I know the sentence says something, but like my brain puts the inflection on some other word that I think what the author's doing here. The whole reason I bring it up here is sometimes, and it's only sometimes, the use of of certain contractions at the very beginning of a sentence is like my brain would say the whole thing out. And it literally means nothing. And yet it trips me up. I don't know. So what I would naturally say, where is everybody? Why is everything off? But where is everybody? In my head, I'm like, it should be where is everybody? But that's totally a me thing. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that with authors that you've read. Every now and then I come across something like that. You woke up 3 days earlier than expected, Miss Marlin. The voice inside the capsule answered, this time from the ceiling as well. The rest of the crew is still sleeping, and hopefully they won't wake up until the program time. Any specific reason why I woke up like this? It seems to be a malfunction. Such good luck, she said sarcastically while stretching her back. Can you turn the lights on? One moment, please. I like this exchange. I like the interspersed bits of action here, keeping things kind of present and moving. I'm able to visualize this really well. Light slowly showered the area, showing immaculate white walls with a green line parallel to the floor. In front of her was a small room with hanging clothes on the wall facing the door and white slippers. Alice remembered putting them there right before entering the cryogenic capsule, but her memories about everything else were still blurry. She entered the room and took a towel from next to the full-length mirror to her left that was facing a shower. After washing and drying her face, she looked at her other self. Okay, here's one thing. I don't know what the full theme of this story is going to be, but there's this. Okay, I'll phrase it this way. I think there's opportunity here to start even right now. If, let's say, I'm speculating here. Let's say the theme of the story is that, things seem amiss, or that there's more than meets the eye of what's happening on the ship. I kind of got some of that from the blurb that we looked at earlier. But let's say the theme of the story is that. Something I would, I'd suggest you consider, Chicky, is this sort of waking up moment kind of gives you this full freedom to kind of foreshadow that theme a little bit. For example, I once wrote a story that's still sitting unfinished on my computer. But in the opening chapter, I have this kid who's sitting at a bus station, waiting for his mom to come pick him up in this town that he hasn't been in years. And the whole theme of the story is about, like, in this town, like, so much has been covered up to cover up the old history of the town and things that have been dark and criminal, all these secrets being sort of covered over. And so in this opening scene, there's, I was trying to think, what's a way that I can kind of work that idea into just this opening moment? Because I have this introduction to the character. I could also introduce the reader to the theme. So in this case, I had my main character kind of scratching at some of the paint on this bench that they're sitting at. Everything's been repainted. Everything has this shiny new polish on it. but the paint starts chipping away, and underneath is what he remembers of this town. Underneath is the same color that this bench was when he left this town 10 years ago, kind of showcasing the fact that even though something's been covered up, painted over, made to look new, looks all nice now, what's underneath is still, it's not gone, right? It was kind of trying to figure out some way to get that theme into here. And so I almost feel like there's some good opportunity here with what we're about to experience. And you might do this where we can be like, okay, the theme of this story is going to be there's more than meets the eye, that something is amiss, that something should be done, hasn't been done, or something that shouldn't be done is happening. And we can take some of these fine details that our main character is experiencing and kind of build that foreshadowing in. So like, for example, in my mind, I'm like, okay, the ship is going to be nice, white, pristine, but like, if you wanted to communicate potentially that something is wrong here, maybe tell me about how the shoes are like maybe not in the exact place that they were, or like puts on the shoes and she steps away and we can see the dust underneath the shoes, but everything else is so pristine, some sort of contrast of like something being amiss. I could be totally speculating on what the theme is, but I think the message is getting across, like especially with the story that you have that's so developed already. That could be something that's kind of easy to work into this opening that would pay off in just the reading experience. Let's keep going. Also, we got Coffee Create Connect. Hello, welcome. I feel like I've seen you around here before. Glad to have you back. All right, she looked at her other self. So this was it. The 12 years had passed. It was unbelievable that the woman looking at her from the glass was the same one that had entered the ship so long ago. Not a single difference, as if no time had passed at all. She got closer to the mirror and examined her deep blue eyes, reddish and irritated by the liquid that had contained her. Well, this isn't bad, she said to herself. I still look 23. The memory of her graduation flashed in her mind. How long ago was that? 8 months? She was still 22 then. After that 6-month rush, until she located the signal's point of origin, for a brief period of her life she became important, or at least her device did. This whole mission was thanks to her. Here's something I want to get everyone's thoughts on. Here's something I want to get some thoughts on. I do this a lot in my writing, where I have, and I feel like I don't see it happen a lot, but I'm excited to see Chicky doing it. In my personal life, in my own experience, I do pretty often have like these flashes of like kind of vivid memories in very specific cases. Like, I'm trying to think of, honestly, it's probably usually related to trauma, but anyways, bypassing that. When I'm writing in my stories, I also write about these sort of memories flashing past my character's eyes. Does anyone else write with that kind of detail? Because I'm seeing Chicky do it here. Or do you not process information that way? And does that seem kind of foreign to you? The idea of this sort of memory flashing by real fast. What do you guys think? I'll be interested to see. I'm going to keep going, but I'd like to see what you guys think of this. Because I don't see it too often in, I think, the books that I read personally. I don't see other people writing it like that, but I definitely do. And I see Chicky doing it. All right, here we go. She sighed and closed the room door. After undressing, she got in the shower. The water was hot. She let it hit her head for a while, just enjoying its temperature as it flowed down her body. It helped her refresh her thoughts. Who would have thought that her graduation project would lead to such an incredible finding? She chuckled, amazed by the situation. The interstellar conqueror cruise Ninlo. A year ago, she wouldn't have even imagined leaving Dakota. Now, in this point, we are getting exposition here. We are getting how we got to this point of the story for our character. I would like to see, let me phrase it right. I think I would like to see this information come out in some way through dialogue, if possible. And you may be saying, well, it's just our character by themselves. That's what I was saying about the experience I've had with short stories like this. But all that being said, it's just one paragraph. We'll see how much more exposition we get. If this is all it is, boom, totally fine. Let's keep going. At least the hard work paid off. Steam had fogged the door in the mirror. She stepped out of the shower and got dressed. The white clothes were as impeccable as the ship's walls. Her stomach roared as she was putting the slippers on, and it wasn't until that moment that she felt it completely empty. I'm dying. I need to eat now. You shouldn't be awake, the woman's soft voice said, making Alice look at the ceiling. I have to alter some protocols for your survival these days. I'll prepare your vitamin cocktail. Leave this area. Keep going straight after passing the intersection. The dining area will be on your right. I'll guide you with lights and prepare everything. I think we're going to see how common it is. Unless there is a specific area that's going to be pretty important for knowing like where all the locations are for the story, I think I'd like to go ahead and just get straight to I'll guide you with the lights and prepare everything and just keep it going. Cora says, I want that AI in my house. Thank you, Alice replied, nodding, leaving the tiny room, glancing at her own cryo-sleep capsule one last time. The door closed as soon as she left the area, and the corridor's lights flicked on. As she walked, the lights turned on a couple meters before her and turned off right after she passed them. The walls were smooth and gray, with the same green line parallel to the floor. The intersection wasn't too far from the cryosleep area, dividing the hall into three. Even though she wanted to know what was down the other paths, her stomach was demanding something in it. She kept following the lights until reaching the area. 8 white tables with orange seats and benches, same color as the line that painted the walls in the halls. Are the benches the same color? Because I thought the line was green, but these are orange seats. 8 white tables with orange seats and benches, same color of the line painted in the walls and the halls, occupied much of the space of the huge diner. A buffet was on the far left side, but even from the entrance, she could see everything was empty. All right, let's talk about the traveling through the ship here. I don't know how long it's going to be before we actually get... I'm sorry, my chair is so creepy. You hear that? Like crazy. I don't know how long it's going to be until we get our next person. Maybe in this first chapter, maybe later. Could be, 3 days time. But this is another thing I see in those short stories, which is a lot of times I am left desiring more in terms of the decor of the ship. Because when I think of a lot of sci-fi stuff, I think of the pristine white walls, unless you're talking about like, Ripley, the Alien movies, all of that's like gunmetal and steam, and it doesn't quite feel so futuristic, still grimy. Of course, we're still setting the scene here. I guess what I'm saying is, in so many spaceships, we see a lot of white walls. And as a reader, I want to know more. I want to see more of what makes it feel different, I wonder if there's a chef or something among the crew. Remember to not eat before drinking your cocktail, the voice said as Alice ventured a couple of steps into the area, making her flinch. Ah, you scared me, she exclaimed, trying to recover her breath. I'm sorry, ma'am. Who are you? Alice asked, heading to the drinks fountain on the right side of the buffet where a green liquid was being poured into a glass. Tell me how this liquid's being poured. Is it coming out of the ceiling? Is there If it's being poured, where is it being poured from? This is where you can start making this setting feel a little bit more like, at my fingertips, And I think this is why I never saw this movie Passenger with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. But of course, any story that's going to be about waking up on a ship early is probably going to draw some comparisons to that movie because it was so popular. And I think this is why they had like that whole, didn't they have like a whole bartender? They had like a whole bartender as an AI in that, right? Again, I never saw it. Kayla says, I feel like at this stage of the story, the vibes of the ship may be more important than the specifics of the layout. I think that may be a good way to phrase it. And we are getting vibes. That's not to say we're not getting vibes. I'm totally getting vibes. Let's learn about our AI. Apollo, Alice repeated, curious. Automatic pilot and life assistant. All right, let's be honest. The most fun part of writing a science fiction story is figuring out how to name the AI, right? It's figuring out what the acronym is going to be. We all know. We all know the fun part is being like, all right. This AI has to have a cool name and an acronym. And you know what? I think Apollo, pretty great. I like it. Automatic pilot and life assistant. Well, that makes sense. She took the glass and sipped a bit, hesitating. Green apple. It tastes better than I thought it would. A little bit too sweet, though. Thanks, Apollo said. Please drink it all. You'll be able to eat solid food in an hour. Also, I'm liking your dialogue, Chicky. I like it. I'm glad we're already at the, I'm glad we're already at a point where it feels like Alice can have a conversation and we can start to pick up stuff about her personality through this dialogue. It works with an AI because an AI is going to be the character in our story too. It doesn't have to be conversation with another person. Alice swallowed the vitamins in a couple of sips. Eat what? There's nothing here. And an hour, she whined. An hour. Damn, Alice said to herself. I doubt I can make it. She took a deep breath, ignoring her still growling stomach, and walked back to the entrance. As she had time to kill before actually eating, she decided to explore the ship now that there was nobody to tell her where she couldn't go. She remembered the moment she saw the Hercules 3 for the first time, just moments before boarding it to leave Earth. 4 stories tall and 1.5 blocks from the motors to the cabin made it a monster, one she was eager to explore. I like your description here. I think this is a great way to showcase I feel like I can wrap my head around the size of this. With sci-fi, you never know if you're going to get a ship that's like the size of a planet or a ship that is 4 stories tall and 1.5 blocks. I think this is a really easy way to showcase that. I like it. She stood right in front of the now closed dining area doors, thinking. I think I'd rephrase this. Get this thinking closer to the beginning of the sentence there. The lights were on both sides of the hall. She moved to the right until she saw another corridor opening to her left and led to a room labeled infirmary, but there was no way to activate its control panel. I'm sorry, Miss Marlin, but only Mr. Beerich. Oh, you guys are killing me with all these dang names. I'm sorry, Miss Marlin, but only Mr. Beerich and Miss Vukuzvak. It's Vukuzvak. Miss Vukuzvak can access this room. Bayrick does sound better. You're right, Kaylee. Apollo announced from a speaker next to the sign. Her voice was oddly human, as if there was some woman in a control room following her movements. You can enter once they are here. For now, the doors won't open. Weren't. Her voice was oddly human, as if there was some woman in a control room following her movements. I feel like this sentence feels a little awkward. I I would also imagine in this kind of situation, I think Alice would be familiar with the fact that the AI is the AI. Her voice oddly human, as if someone in a control room. Feels a little awkward to me. Alice shrugged and returned to the main hall. The only sound she could hear was from her own steps, which produced a slight feeling of unease in her. She was used to being alone. It was normal for her, but not that alone. But now it seemed like nothing besides her and the ship existed. She looked at the ceiling. Should she talk to an AI? She had never been in direct contact with an AI as autonomous as Apollo sounded. She barely had any idea how to talk to humans. I like that. I like it. She sighed. Continuing in the same way, the hall led to the closed doors of the lounge, a part familiar to her as the ship's entrance was on the left, so she turned back. Even though she remembered the lounge was on the ship's middle level, she didn't recall passing those corridors on her way to the cryosleep area. Were the rooms on the same level too? She couldn't remember either, yet she knew she had been there. She passed the dining area, frowned, and slowed down. So in this case, I think we're getting too much of things like left, right. The layout of the ship is going to be a little hard to follow right now. And it's also worth asking, how specific does the reader need to know? Like, how familiar does a reader need to be with the layout? I would say most of the time in writing. And this will vary based on genre. I think there are plenty of stories that will create basically that map of the ship. And have that be like a rewarding part, is like kind of knowing where the characters are. I think that's a pretty common thing with sci-fi. Right now, I'm still with I think what we had seen. I can't remember if it was Cora or Kaylee who had said, I want to know like more of the vibes, less of the direction right now. Because even if you were showcasing where all these things are, the fact that our main character is getting turned around a little bit is also getting me kind of turned around. You know what I'm saying? Apollo, she called, her voice sounding too loud. Yes, ma'am, the automatic pilot responded somewhere in the ceiling. Where are the bedrooms? At the next turn to the left. Thank you. No problem, ma'am. I would also, as a rule of thumb, I've come more around to the idea of completely eliminating like conversation closings, especially if there's a back and forth in my writing. And this is my personal feeling on this, so it's not a rule or anything. In the same way that I really avoid any sort of greeting beyond just like kind of getting into the conversation. Same thing with the closing of the conversation. It's kind of a formality that we go through, in my opinion. And removing that can just keep things moving a little bit. You could say, as a reader, I see these things, I get it, I skip over it. You're totally right. But as a writer, I think I would still prefer to have the finished product be a little bit more streamlined, because those will add up. And I'm not saying every single conversation or dialogue begins with these sort of formulaic entry or greetings and conclusions, but that's just how I feel. Apollo's voice turned off, immersing the ship again in absolute silence, only interrupted by the faint sound of Alice's footsteps. After a few meters, the corridor split. Since the bedrooms were on her left and the hall ahead, which had its lights off, led to the cryosleep area, she chose the path on her right. It ended at an elevator after a curve to the left. I kind of want, this is totally optional. I feel like there's such a great opportunity for a little bit of an echo, especially if I'm thinking of the ship in terms of like, we're not hearing the hum of the life support. We're not hearing the distant conversations of other people. Maybe we're not hearing any of those systems that are normally on for people, just because we want the AC and we need more oxygen circulating. I feel like it could be unsettling to treat this like, the hint of an echo with the footsteps. So it sounds like there is someone out there walking around, even though it's us. And of course, we know it's just us. But I would be a little creeped out to be the only human walking around the spaceship. After a few meters, the corridor split. Since the bedrooms were on her left and the hall ahead, which had its lights off, led to the cryosleep area, she chose a path on her right, led to an elevator after a curve to her left. Still getting lots of directions here. We got left, we got right, we got left again. I have a hard time visually, like, keeping all the location stuff kind of there. I kind of skip over it when I'm reading, but to be fair, someone else might love it. Getting that mental map of stuff. She tried the base level first with a vague idea of what she could find there. The elevator doors opened, but she hesitated to step out. It was way colder and pitch black. The only light came from the elevator, catching a glimpse of the corridor in front of her, but the hall's lights weren't giving signs to be turned on soon. Paula? Unlike the middle level, there was a noise. Nightheart, hello, hello. It was faint, coming from the depths of the darkness, yet she could hear it clearly, as it was the only other sound besides her breathing. She didn't know if it was better or worse than the absolute silence. Paula, she asked again, using the control panel to close the doors. You shouldn't go in there yet, she answered, making Alice flinch. I read your background. I'll take you to the top level. You'll find the communications area there if you want to take a look. All right. Who else here? Who else here feels this? That this is a little ominous. Tell me I'm wrong. When an AI is like, you shouldn't go in there. I read your background. I'm like, what? Marlon didn't say a thing. The hall's lights were on when the door opened. The communications area was the only room she saw on her way. Beyond its door, the lights were off, and even though she walked a little further to see if they turned on, they didn't. What's ahead? The cabin. You don't need to go there. You don't need to go there. This freaking Apollo. I'm appalled right now. Alice stared at the darkness for a few seconds before entering the communications area. Several monitors and devices were on the right side of the room. Under them, a control panel occupied almost all the space. A couple of chairs were in the middle. The left side wall had nothing on it but the green line, while the one opposite to the door had a large horizontal window at the height of Alice's chest that comprised almost the entire wall, covered by a metal shield. Apollo, can you lift the window's shield? One moment, please. The shield moved upwards, followed by the barely audible sound of an engine. The infinite slowly started to show before her eyes. Alice's breath froze in her lungs as she felt completely insignificant compared to the greatness that was in front of her. It was her first time in space. Her eyes hadn't witnessed anything like that before. For a moment, she thought she was about to faint. The shield uncovered the window completely, and Alice had to take a seat. Her heart was pounding fast against her ribs as the Hercules 3 passed a nebula that looked nearby. Its blue, green, and red colors painted the area and reflected on the screens, making the entire room look like a street in Neo-Tokyo. This is a great sentence, or a paragraph, I mean. This is a great paragraph, Chicky. The only thing I would change here, I think this is really well done. Only thing I would change here is Alice had to take a seat. That sounds like it was too much of a simple choice. I would put something like Alice collapsed down, or Alice fell into a seat, or Alice like she didn't have the choice. Like, she had to take a seat is a way of saying, like, yeah, like, she needed to do this thing, but it still is kind of gentle in its actual, like, passing of action, versus Alice's knees felt weak and she collapsed into a chair. You know what I mean? That's what I would say here. All right. How many words have we gotten so far? Oh. Yeah. Hold on. Let me see what we got. Because we still got another story to go through. I think we're at the point to stop here. And we got our 2,300 words. Chicky. I think so far the intro to this story, I think we are getting some genre conventions that readers will definitely want to see. Like I said, I'm a fan of the opening of like being alone on the ship. And I'm sure we're going to get some more of this in here because we just got a hint of the sort of like potentially unnerving kind of thing with like this going down to the base level and it being all dark. I think it would be good for the reader experience if you are going to lean any more into that feeling of the unsettled nature of things to have some more clues to that in here. And there may be ones in here that I'm not able to see because it pays off later on. But right now, I would love to see little details in here that are hinting at that. Because I think a lot of people are expecting that story to take that kind of turn. And so we're already looking for it just because it's kind of a normal genre kind of thing. I like once we get to the point where Apala and Alice are speaking to each other. That feels a lot more like things are coming together. Like I'm able to pick up more about Alice. It also breaks up the narration. And it's not like the narration is bad because clearly you have like the writing skills you need to tell this story. But there is a certain point as a reader when we're like, all right, I've got all the narration I need. Get me to the character stuff. Some nebula smell of a raspberry. That's good to know. Other feedback I would give here, I don't want as much direction. I would want to limit the use of left and right kind of stuff, especially as we're moving between rooms, because it's hard to keep things oriented as a reader in my head of like, okay, this is on the left, this is on the right, but now we're in another room. So like in my brain, I'm like, I'm not going to remember where those things were. Why did I spend time with that information? Like I said, other people may feel differently about that. Apala seems like it's going to be a good use of AI in your story, and I'm a big fan of the name Apala. I like that. I'm interested to see where it goes. And the good news, if you in the chat are also interested in seeing where it goes, there is another 298,000 words roughly of this story in existence. We have lots of good feedback in the chat, plus other random things. As a left-right challenge person, those aren't helpful directions to me. What helps is knowing which areas are next to one another, which we do kind of get that. It's so funny because I'm different. I'm not even trying to keep the map in my head. I kind of just want you to tell me where we're entering, you know? And then if there's a point in the future where the location of things are important, where like, oh, the characters are in this room, but we need to get to the control room quickly. Like at that point, I also want you to refresh for me. Is that an easy ask or a difficult ask? Is that a long way to go or is that right around the corner? And then of course, if you are super serious about the location of everything, great opportunity for a map. I love a good map of a spaceship. I would take a map of a spaceship or a space station over a fantasy map. And I think that's a hot take. But it's one I firmly believe in. Let's see, is there anything else here? So Chicky had said that this first chapter is 8,000 words. In this doc, I think we get a little less than half of that. You can do a lot with 8,000 words. I'm interested to see, and when you come back, Chicky, I'll have you answer. I'm interested to see where you would claim where the inciting incident of your story really kicks off. All right, before we bring Chicky back in, is there any feedback anyone else would like to give? Any comments, any questions, things you like, things you'd like to see improved, things you had questions on? Now is the chance before we move to our final story. Lots of good feedback regarding directions, and this is a preference thing. So I don't think there's necessarily a 100% answer for it, because I think it's a preference not only of the reader but also of the writer. You may love the idea of like having a solidified map of your ship. And other people will be like, yes, I've been waiting for this. And then other people are like, just tell me what room I'm in and where we're going next. And that's me. All right, Chicky. I will say this as well. Chicky, I like your prose. There are a couple lines that came in that could be touched up, but that's all some basic editing stuff. Again, make sure you're reading things out loud, watching out for that cross-sentence pollution. And give me some vibes. Some vibes of the ship. That's all I got for you. Come on back in, Chicky. You are welcome back. Nightheart, I got terrible news for you. This is the last of the editing live streams right now. You came in on the last day. Also, glad to have you here, Nightheart. I couldn't really welcome you because we were in the midst of reading the story. But on Tuesday and Wednesday, we also did this looking at a couple different first chapters and used that as a jumping off point to talk about some really good story stuff. Like, when should you use a prologue? What does a prologue do? And when should you avoid using a prologue? What's the importance of the first chapter? And what do you need to accomplish in that first chapter? All that great stuff. However, Nightheart, yeah, every time my wife goes out of town, I'm like, ooh, time to do a live stream. And that's how we ended up here. Chicky, thank you so much for sharing this. I'm excited to see what happens when you do get to the end of all of your editing. I know you got you got a long ways to go at a 300,000 word story. Chicky, what are your thoughts on what I was asking about the inciting incident? Where do you say your inciting incident falls on sort of, either word count or chapter, or if there's a percentage value for your story? Because if it's such a long story, that's one of the things that makes me wonder. You could have read until you got to the next dialogue to find the introduction to the main issue. Them's the breaks. I'm sorry. Corby says 10% would be 38,000 words in, which is exactly why I'm asking. Sorry about that, Chicky. It's also getting already later than I thought. And we have another story to go through. The siding incident is the beginning of chapter 4. Okay. Which, you know what? If we did assume the 8,000 word chapter that you said for chapter 1 continues, that would land at about the 32,000 word mark. 10%. All right, we have one last story here. Oh, Chicky, by the way, feel free to respond, add any context, anything you want to add in there for all the people who are giving feedback. While I get everything ready for our final story, which is one I'm really excited for, called What Would Janus Do by Day Swallower. I'll get the blurb ready where you guys chat. Okay, this says, I forgot we had one more story. We do. And I think we're going to end up going pretty late. I do have to feed the dogs at some point. So let's go ahead and get into this. Let me tell you about Day Swallower's story. Let me find this blurb. Excuse me. Now, I chose this story because I saw the blurb. I did some reading through the beginning of Day Swallower's story. And the thing is, in all the past stories I've read from Day Swallower, I can't remember the way I phrased it before, which was like strangely or like weirdly. Oh, hold on, the dog's going crazy. Do you remember the way I phrased your writing before, Day Swallower? It was something like strangely addicting, something like that. And so I wanted to put this in here because I'm interested to see with how wild your story idea is, how you handle the exposition, which was kind of the theme for these stories. Is Day Swallower in the chat? Say, geez, I'll look it up. All right, I'll go ahead and read the blurb. Let me tell you about what would Janus do. In the unfashionable outpost of Neo Dulwich, multi-limbed cafe owner Janus serves cryptic wisdom alongside caramel cream coffees. When tenant Joe discovers someone living inside his office chair, reality begins to unravel, triggering a cascade of absurdity, talking pigeons, prophetic gut feelings, and a cosmic conspiracy forever change humanity's understanding of spacefaring crabs. A darkly whimsical tale where Kafkaesque surrealism meets galactic intrigue. And if that doesn't sum up a Day Swallower story, I don't know what does. Let me tell you about Day Swallower's story. Let me get our text all ready here, and we'll just dive in. I picked this. I told you that sort of exposition was the kind of theme I was going in here, because science fiction and fantasy always have to do with introducing you to a new world. We want to make sure we're doing that correctly. And this seemed like it was going to be such a unique world. I wanted to make sure that we had this a great jumping off point to say, do we have the information we need to make sure that the reader is feeling the story at the most effective way? Or are we getting too much information where it's starting to hurt the pacing? That's the balance you have to walk with exposition. Let's tackle Day Swallower's What Would Janus Do? And Day Swallower, you know the rules. So we'll be looking forward to hearing your comments after we've read through. How many words are we at here? What do we got? 3,000. Okay. All right, here we go. Already people have questions. I read a little bit of this, but I have not read it all. Beyond the unfashionable fringes of the galaxy loomed a haze of raspberry-scented dust. Within it was dirt, and on that planet, the drab city of Neo Dulwich. There, in the quiet hours between way-to-work coffee and brunch, the humans left us alone in our cafe. We'll go one more paragraph, then we'll talk about the intro. A spiral galaxy, a goldfish, then a flower pictogram bloomed from our pen while the futures flowed through us. We titled the piece in green ink, H&T 314122. This is our introduction to Day Swallower's world. I can't help but when I read this, I hear the voice of that dude from Twilight Zone. It just like comes out in that same like inflection in my head. Beyond the unfashionable fringes of the galaxy loomed a haze of raspberry-scented dust. Within it was dirt, and on that planet, the drab city of Neo Dulwich. What's that dude's name? Who's the Twilight Zone guy? That's who this reminds me of. I think we get Douglas Adam vibes, Jay Baker says. Rod Sterling meets Citizen's Guide. Okay, there it is. I am a big fan of the start of a story starting from way zoomed out and zooming in to what actually matters. Rod Serling. Thank you. And that's what we get here. And we also get so many like little strange details. The humans left us alone in our cafe. Within it was dirt. Is that a planet? Is it just what you would call a planet if, a big bunch of carbon? Raspberry scented dust, which I saw in the comments. Day Swallower said that some galaxies smell like raspberries. Earth is dirt. You heard it here first, folks. Earth is dirt. Cowbells attached to the door rattled as it opened. Our tenant, Joe, clutched at the frame for support. He was not into repetitive self-exertion, so we couldn't fathom what caused this state of distress. Here's what I like already. We are in paragraph 3. We are getting interaction, right? We're going right to the dialogue in the next paragraph. We are also getting the strange sort of prose of repetitive self-exertion. We couldn't fathom what caused this state of distress, kind of setting up that our perspective character has a weird way of approaching things. It makes you wonder, who are they? What are they? All right. Shouldn't you be watching traffics? We asked. The impenetrable thicket of his eyebrows arched high on his pale face. That is some prose right there. That's some classic Day Swallower prose. My chair farted, Joe said. He staggered to the table next to our till. That's normal. Our chairs make noise. We rubbed a hand across a bar stool to illustrate. It squeaked, then made a rattling noise through the metal components. After his brain reset with a series of blinks, Joe continued. No, it sounded wet. I could smell it, like stadium toilets. I think someone is living in my chair. Joe looked around suspiciously. We tapped on the counter as we did a quick poll. Tap, 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 then a reluctant 2 more. Show us, we said. His flat was above the cafe, so it wouldn't take long. With the vintage back in 5 minutes sign in hand, we walked Joe out of the cafe. I think the strongest part of this intro is the strangeness of our character, which injects itself into the prose, but the fact that the pacing moves quickly. That's important. Especially if you're wanting to create this weird vibe. You could say, like, maybe if I wanted the reader to fully understand that we have this weird character, I need to give them a lot of that narration. But that's not necessarily the case. It's more investing as a reader as long as things are still happening. If you're bringing me into new situations, I'm here for the ride. I'm ready to learn. You know what I mean? The characters are not human, right? Chicky, nothing has specifically said. Nothing has specifically said whether people are human or not human. It doesn't feel like they're human, that's for sure. We walked Joe out of the cafe. Thank you. I wasn't sure what to do. Joe followed, peering at a discarded mattress. Did it move? He asked. Council knows about the fly tipping, we said. I don't know what fly tipping is. Is this a UK thing? He held his hand towards his door, the key twisting uselessly in the air. Did it gurgle or something? Hand us your keys, we said. You can watch the mattress. The door opened with a faint squeak. We've been reading Kafka, we said, hoping it would help distract Joe from the mattress. Yeah, the cockroach guy. Not comforting, Joe said. We thought he was a human. No, okay, yes, he was a human. A guy became a cockroach in one of his stories. We don't recall any cockroaches. They must have read The Castle. They must have read... Hold on, what's the other one called? They must have read The Trial, am I right? Ah, then how is... For we are like tree trunks in the snow. Horror. Joe stepped into the apartment but kept his eyes on the mattress up to the last moment. I'm already scared enough. Talking about a horror writer won't help. We continued to the story as Joe moved onto the steps. He is a most excellent poet. In appearance, they lie sleek, and a little push should be enough to set them rolling. No, it can't be done, for they are firmly wedded to the ground. But see, even that is only in appearance. I have to assume this is still Kafka. I'm not familiar with it. Also, this mattress thing feels weird to me, but at the same time, you could argue it's all about Kafka-esque storytelling of like just like putting stuff out there and like not explaining it at all. That's what Kafka does, and letting that be the unsettling nature of the story. I don't know what fly tipping is though, and that leaves me being like, what the heck is fly tipping? All right, let's keep going. I can accept it being weird and keep going. That's a creepy story. Joe pushed past us at the top of the stairs. He stood at the home office entrance with his hands open. We asked, how is that creepy? We stopped our inquiry when we saw what held Joe's attention. The chair back lay on the floor. Inside was a space large enough for a small person. A virtual reality headset was flashing blue images for the miniature absent resident. The smell of salt and vinegar chips, sewer gas, and old prawn cocktail filled the room. Closer to the chair, scents of unwashed human body, old food, and general filth wafted from its vacated chamber. We flinched our olfactory bulb with a snap. Who up here snapping their olfactory bulb? What up? Anyone else out here snapping their olfactory bulb? Who up snapping their olfactory? Okay, I'll keep going. Joe stepped further into the room and spun to check the walls. That wasn't open earlier. Lease states no sublets as agreed and signed. We frowned as humans do. Sorry, Janus, you're not making sense. He said, I didn't know someone was living in my chair. I sleep in that thing. Joe scratched his head and looked back at the chair. Sweat marks formed around his armpits. We could see a hint of freckles on his cheeks with the increased pallor. Srail era snowgip. Pigeons are liars. Dayswaller, what's happening, my guy? What's happening? This may be an imprint of the sublet shirt. Pigeons are liars. Joe's shoulders slumped. His breath and skin were back to normal. He seemed on the verge of talking several times. I should call the police. Dust on the windsill is missing in human shapes. We see it is not from you. Socks are too small and the smell is different than from your feet. This was against your consent. We have some relief. This is what I mean with the prose and storytelling that I've experienced in past Day Swallower stories. I'm left with a feeling of what in the world is going on. I don't understand what's happening. The words you're choosing are not the words I would choose. And yet I keep reading because I keep just getting more stuff. It's strange. And I'll be the one to say it. Day Swallower. It's strange. It's weird. It's absurd. It's absurdist. So many times I read a sentence and I'm like, what does that mean? But I keep reading and I keep asking, what does that mean? And I'm like, along for the ride. Chicky says, I have no idea what's going on. That's how I feel. But I keep reading. Feels very O from Home. I'm not familiar with O from Home. I can only imagine Day Swallower is watching all this, just laughing. Just laughing. Mission accomplished. Let's keep going. This is as far as I read in preparation. So if there's something absolutely bonkers after this, you cannot hold me accountable. Joe stopped pushing at his phone. His open mouth was the shape of human internal emotion, subset horror, subset human cringe. Jesus. We reasoned sock size may be a taboo topic for Joe. What does that mean? Human internal emotion subset horror subset human cringe. But is that robot or is that alien? Is that what an alien would go through? Because that sounds like robot to me. All right. This is, Joe waved his hands at the seat, a violation. He put a hand over his eyes. Isn't there something that you can do about this with your sphincter magic? What? What does that mean? What is sphincter magic? He can't keep getting away with it. We poked at a packet stuffed in the void next to where the chair dweller's head would have been. It fell onto the floor and opened like a noisy flower, showing the Koi Chips branding. Sphincter magic is fantasy. Bowel science. There was a tiny penknife near the left armhole. We decided not to alert Joe. You have a second brain in your guts like us. Your gut brain is about as cute and fluffy as a domestic cat in both size and demeanor. When trained, it can fetch and do tricks. You should be able to use it if you'd apply yourselves. Imagine if we asked you to do some human magics. We'll let the comment hang for a moment. When we saw a bicycle, it was magic. Now, bowels as to bicycles. Listen to me, Morty. We saw a bicycle, it was magic. Now, now bowels as to bicycles. All right, I will say here, we got some cross-sentence pollution over here. Hand in hands, back to back in sentences. I touched some of those up. Otherwise, I mean, your prose is good, Day Sweller. Your prose is good, and I keep reading, and I keep asking myself, why am I still reading here? A chair with a sphincter, like a chair needs a sphincter, like a fish needs a bicycle. Well, you said it, brother. I was thinking it. You were saying it. We relaxed our guts. Futures twisted and canceled out. You are welcome to call from the cafe. The insurance will need the crime number. We tapped out a quick vote, then wrote egg salad sandwich with a caramel cream coffee on an order card. We motioned towards the steps. Joe straightened, looked to the door, then to us, then to the closet. He grabbed a broom and marched downstairs. His bravery faltered for a moment at the door. After taking a deep breath, he launched himself at the stained collection of springs and tattered fabric. A hairless lady diverted her eyes. Whole galaxy's gone mad, if you ask me, Wiggins, she said. The lady picked up her Shih Tzu and then tucked it into her sleeve. What does that mean? How big is her sleeve? What is this paragraph? Joe paused his mattress beating so she could pass. This whole live stream was a mistake. We turned to the cafe door. The back in 5 minutes sign no longer matched the older 1940s style lace curtains, nor the pastel-hued wooden walls and meticulously chipped black and white tiles from the original electric cafe. We tucked the sign under the counter and made a note to redesign it. This is the most normal sentence of the story so far. Joe, sweating from his thwacking, God, sat in the Harry Regency-inspired section. You know, it gets to the point I'm nervous to scroll down. It gets to the point you just can't predict what's going to happen next. It's like being on the Heart of Gold when the infinite improbability drive is on. Look, if this is the world Day Swallower is living in, fear them. Fear them and just take a step back. It's Day Swallower's world. We're all just living in it for a brief moment in time. Curious, his flat was decidedly retro. Can I say this word on stream? Humans rarely know what they really want. A young human couple entered the cafe. Again, the most normal sentence of the story so far. You know, there's a meme that I see pretty often. And it's always a video. And it's like, never let them know your next move. And it's someone who, like, every move that they are, everything that they're doing, they're taking a jacket and you think they're going to put it on their back. And then they, like, swing it out of a window and slam the window door. And then they turn away. And you're like, okay, they're moving on to the next thing. And then they turn back and they flip open the window and like a milkshake comes in and then they're sipping on the milkshake. And then you're like, okay, this person's drinking a milkshake. And then they flip the whole thing over and it was just a little piece of cardboard on the top. And inside there is like a red ball that falls in their hand. And then they throw it off the side of the screen. And then it comes in from the other side of the screen and they catch it. And then they take a bite because it was an apple the whole time. That's the Day Swallower story formula. A young human couple entered the cafe. Joe rang the police while we made their order. Can I borrow your pen and pad? Joe asked. He pointed to the pad on our belt. We lifted the pad and flipped the pen with a flourish into our other hand. We clicked the pen over to green before handing them over. We checked on the couple with a sandwich and coffee in our hands. They settled into a booth next to the stained glass Pelici sign. It was authentic, unlike much of the other hung decor. That's good to know. That's good to know. Egg salad sandwich and a mint hero coffee, the woman said. What's a mint hero coffee? I don't know what that is. Which is exactly what they want me to think. We put the sandwich in our hand on the table, but retreated to make a new coffee. Joe changed the color of the pen to blue when the detective started reciting the crime number. The ink was dry. He noticed the number next to the doodles and followed them. HNT 314 over 122. He closed his call, then looked up at us. How did you know this and not tell me? Joe tapped the pen and the pad on the crime number. What? Day Swallower. Day Swallower. It's horse. Who is? Do you need a medicinal concoction? Honey lemon chicken is normally prescribed. Tea, honey and lemon tea. Also, horse is the animal. No, never mind. Joe tore the page from the pad. Sorry, I didn't mean to agitate you. Why would someone want to live in my chair? We'll cross that bridge when we burn it. Classic. We collected the pad. Tea? Milk? No sugar. We put the tea on the table before he finished his order. I don't know what to do. A characteristic act of one in your position is to rub your eyebrow down with your smallest finger. It was another Kafka quote, but good advice for this situation. Joe rubbed down his eyebrows. A pigeon watched from the seat next to Joe, bobbing his head to regard Joe with each eye. It's all going to be fine, it said in a comforting tone. The pigeon then stepped into the news hologram. Thanks, mate, Joe said. He turned away from the pigeon and noticed us taking a new vote. Did you think of another Kafka quote? Humans still confuse us. We poured some milk into the frothing robot and filled the coffee hopper as we spoke. Your guts are always in knots. Not knowing your death is a burden. Joe's face went slack. Sorry I asked. Joe put his forehead against the table and rolled it side from side, which is exactly the feeling I have right now. He seemed hurt by our remark about his guts. All right, hold on. We got to take a break. I'm not even giving feedback now. I'm just experiencing this world that Day Swallower has created and forced me into. But how do you give feedback on a story like this? What's the feedback going to be? I don't want you to make it any less weird. God knows I don't want you to make it any more weird. Of course, Day Swallower, your prose is great. It always has been. It's been a lot of fun to read. I don't know. I don't know how these words come together in your brain and then onto the page. But it sounds like it's a lot of fun. This is the kind of thing that if I were to write, I would be chuckling the whole time. Jonathan Cloud says, I have no idea what to say about this. It's its own genre and existence. That's, yeah. Day Swallower, I think you broke him. I'm both concerned about where we're going to go next and yet intrigued about where we're going to go next. You know, it's here's what I'll say. And you know, I think as easy as it would be to just keep going, I am going to stop here. There is more. I do want to give you good feedback. Like good as in useful feedback. I think the strength of your prose and the unique storytelling aspect that you have for the stories that you want to tell are one of a kind. And so, of course, that is going to be the reason people keep coming back to your stories. I think there has to be some dynamics. And by that, I mean, you know how in a comedy, there's a straight man. There's got to be, and you know, Joe kind of is the straight man here, but there kind of needs to be some way to ground the reader so that not every single moment of a long form story, and I know we're just looking at the first chapter, of a long form story is going to be absurd every step of the way. But giving the reader the chance to have a breather at some point in the story would probably be a good idea. I am interested. I still have no idea who our main character is. Did we get a name at the beginning? We got Joe. No, we didn't. We haven't even gotten a name yet. Maybe we do in the story, but oh God, I'm exhausted. I won't scroll further down here. I would encourage you, Day Swallower, if you are at the point where you would like to share this story, I think people will enjoy reading it. And I think that's the special thing about the way that you write, is that it is crazy. It is absurd, but it's that sort of absurdity where at every point of the way, it's entertaining. At every point of the way, you know, the story is still moving. If we had a huge paragraph or multiple paragraphs of just description, I know you'd probably be able to write it well, but the story would slow down. And I think in those slower moments, that's when you would run the risk of a reader being like, I don't know what's going on. But because this is so dialogue heavy, so character forward, we keep moving. And the reader can be along for the ride for that. I don't know if that can translate to an entire long form story without the chance for there to be a breather, to come back to normalcy for a little bit before dipping back in the absurdity. So I'll be interested to see what you do for more long form stuff as you continue this story. The only kind of feedback I can give would be in regards of not of eliminating confusion on the reader side, but I don't think that's the point of your story. Jonathan says, I think I'm noticing that the MC is love of the free non-human characters. See, that sentence doesn't even make sense to me. Oh, there we go. One of the few non-human characters. You got to read to find out. I don't know how far down in this story it might be before we get that. But again, I don't want to scroll down here and ruin this for those who might want to keep checking this story out. if Day Swallower feels like sharing it in the Discord. It is endlessly entertaining to me in the most absurd way. And I feel like this when I've read Day Swallower's short stories too. I still can't remember the words that I used to call their short story in the last writing challenge, but it was like this. I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And yet I find myself continuing to read. And the short story that you had written previously was more grounded. It did have, it was much more of like a fiction kind of thing, more so than an absurdist, maybe non-human character kind of thing. So while I am talking about the short story, I do want to say it was more grounded than this one. And it was just as good. So Day Swallower, all the feedback I can think to give you, I think would only take away from the charm of your storytelling and your writing. I think that seeing this in the context of a full plot would be the best place to start getting feedback for organizing your story, for structural editing, and then just, classic grammar, spelling kind of stuff. But the prose is already where it needs to be. The absurdity is mesmerizing. And that's, I think, all I can say about it. Does anyone have any last comments before we invite Day Swallower back into the chat? Sounds like a blast. Would honestly love to read it. Brevity is the soul of absurdity, or some misquote like that. I love that. I'm borrowing that. I feel like the main character is the straight guy, and everyone else is just going, what the freak is this thing's deal? Yeah, very well written. Solid pick for the last book of the streams. It's almost like I knew. It's almost like I knew. Maybe you might need a bit more description. He can come back after he takes his Xanax. All right, Day Swallower. I would love to know how far you are in this story, like word count wise, and if you have a prediction for how long you want the story to be. It's got that dry British black and white movie humor. It does. It definitely does. I've been recommended to what's this movie I've been recommended to go watch? I've been recommended to watch this British movie called With Nail and I, and something tells me that it may have some Day Swallower vibes. Maybe not absurdity, but in the dry humor. Day Swallower, are you there? Young lessons. Never look a gift horror in the mouse. Almost brought me to tears. If you had a fun moment from the live stream, feel free to clip it. Those kind of clips are a lot of fun to share around. Day Swallower says the cafe owner is named Janus. Straight man is the detective Annette DePinci, who shows up soon. So there you go. There you go. That was the perfect literary time bomb. All right, yeah, Day Swallower. I think zoomed in on your story, it is just a wild ride and fun. But yeah, I think seeing it in the context of a full plot and seeing how you are able to take your writing style through the narrative leaps and bounds that we need to go through in order to have this full cohesive story, especially if your goal is to write a story that has this sort of 3-act structure. It may not be. That'll be like where the best feedback can be given on the stuff you write. Maybe there's place for more description, but there's also something to be said for fast pacing in this kind of story. It could really just go so many different ways. The more stylized something gets, the harder it is to steer it a certain direction. I would always be afraid that trying to give too much advice that would change your style of telling a story would have a negative impact overall on that. So I think it's an element of sort of following your natural instincts for telling that story, and then after the fact, looking at it through an editing lens of how do we heighten, how do we focus on that. Cora says, I would not volunteer to line edit on this. You're not that bold? Day Swaller says, I have a few Janus chapters, Origin, another 2 with Annette. So we get a perspective switch is what you're saying. With, maybe. With Annette DePinci. All of the mystery for the DePinci storyline is drafted, but it needs some hard pruning and rewriting, 60,000 word goal. I think that seems like a good length. Is the Annette DePinci chapters, do they switch to Annette's perspective? Does it go to a different, like a character perspective? Because that would definitely bring the straight man kind of return to normalcy for a little bit. He votes with his 5 guts. What does that mean? What does he votes with his 5 guts even mean? Janus as a Greek god, yeah. All right. Day Swallower, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us and submitting for this sort of week of editing. And for everyone who was here along for the ride, it was certainly a ride. I appreciate you spending your time with me. There's so many other things you could be doing. I hope you had good fun. More importantly, I hope that we just had good conversation about writing, maybe something you can apply with your own story. If you're not already part of the Discord, there's a link below. Come hang out. And then hopefully we'll do some more stuff like this. I've told you before. I've hinted at it. I have some big news coming soon. I'm really excited to share with you all. And the best news is that it should be equally as fun as all of this. Dayswaller clarifies, sees future with his gut, but only in regard of human food. I feel like I need a translator. I feel like I need someone to interpret for me. I learned about folks here. Day Swallower is probably fun to party with, but you wouldn't want him as your neighbor. I would love to have Day Swallower as my neighbor. But like, not like a neighbor of a townhouse, but like a neighbor across the street and down the road. I'm just playing. Yeah, Day Swallower, if you feel so inclined, I would recommend you share this story with the Discord. I think you intrigued a lot of people to just like go through the experience themselves. My recommendation to you is if you can read it out loud or run it through some software to read it out loud, you will never expect what comes out next, and that's a fun reading experience. Yeah, Day Swallower, keep us up to date. Keep us informed about your progress with your story. Chicky, same thing with you. I know you're editing a ton for such a long story. I always see your updates in the channel about how much further you've gotten, or you know you've run it through AI analysis, and here's what you've discovered. Keep us up to date. That kind of stuff is really fun. We all see that. I don't know if anyone else follows it, but I definitely do. I may not be the most active in the Discord, but I am on there pretty often, at least catching up on what everyone else is doing. And I find that really fun. So I'm sorry I'm not great at being a Discord buddy, but I do lurk. Lots of good stories today. Everyone had a great time. Also, Brain Hopper. I can't remember if Creation Before Disintegration is still here or if Ferruccio has dipped out already, but also keep us up to date on your story. I had a good time with you all. It's been a good week. I'll let you know when the next one of these might be. I just started a new job, so of course things are also hectic over here. But this kind of stuff is way more fun than just... hello, Ferruccio. There you are. Yeah, make sure you keep us up to date in your story. If you wanted to make a post in the story workshop, we have a lot of different people there who keep everyone up to date on the progress for their story. Part of it's accountability, but part of it's just exciting as you get closer to the end of your story. Feel free to share there if you feel so inclined in the story workshop. All right, everyone, I have to go feed the dogs. I will see you around in the Discord. Thank you for hanging out. I had a great time. I can't wait to see some of the clips from a stream like this because it is just bonkers. But also, it's just so much fun to talk about story. Have a great rest of the night. I'll see you around. And yeah, take care. Goodbye.